Glenn Workman is Baltimore royalty in the music community for the last 45 years. He had the privilege of playing keyboards for over 20 years and many studio albums with the offensively underrated Crack the Sky. Glenn was one of the early pioneers on the East Coast to understand MIDI and parlayed that knowledge into an incredible career working with legends like the Rolling Stones and Carole King. Glenn plays in a plethora of local cover bands like Sons of Pirates and the East Coast best Steely Dan cover band Technicolor Motor Home, as well as teaching music at Towson University on the side. Join us for a deep dive interview into this fascinating local Zen master who has braved the world since birth with no shoes. That is not a lie. You will see in tonight's outstanding episode of Sanity Lounge.
Welcome, Baltimore. We're here with another episode of Sanity Lounge featuring Glenn Workman, who has a storied history in the music industry. And unless you've been living under a rock, that's right, you're going to be familiar with some of the bands that he's been in.
Absolutely.
And continues to play in.
Yeah. Now, Glenn and I met earlier last year in
November,
right?
Yeah,
and
roughly.
It was at the 100.7 The Bay studio, and it was cold as shit. And
was that 100? Was that 90 Rock or 100?
No, 107.
107
Yeah,
yeah.
100 Valley.
And I go in the studio. Now, I'm a bit, Glenn, I'm arguably a little soft when it comes to weather, But it was a cold day. I mean, it was I had my long johns on and stuff. This guy walks in shorts and no shoes.
Right.
And I immediately, that's how we broke the ice. I said, what the hell is going
so
on
we
here?
can we can break the ice with that right
so
now.
yes.
Glenn is here right now with no shoes.
Yes, sir.
And it is his thing. Our first guest was Ricky Wise, and he filled us in on the no shoes.
Yeah, I don't know what Ricky Wise's reason is, and I can't remember the first time I met Ricky. There's a couple events, but just a great guy. I've had a good chance. He actually sat in a couple times with different bands I was in over years, and I tried to record him once, and unfortunately, it was an absolute disaster. Technically, we just had it was with his group. It's Dreamboat Armada. Armada, is that what the name? It's in. And again, just everything electrical that could possibly go wrong went wrong. And he said, I saw you over there all day, like pulling wires and doing this. And what was going on? I said, nothing was working.
Right. It's just one of those days.
It was just terrible.
So the no shoes thing, just to cap that real quick, that's been a lifelong thing?
Pretty much, Mike. I mean, my mom told me I had to wear shoes when I went to school. And as soon as I got home from school, they were off. It's hard to find a picture of me other than like an Easter posed picture or something like that, even as an under 5-year-old having any shoes on at all.
That's interesting. So how do you go to stores? Do you just not
walk in like anybody else?
You just walk in?
There's a I'll say a 5-point program, but it's a 5-point plan. It's rare that anybody bothers anymore,
right.
I guess, but when they do, there's usually I can almost tell you exactly the order of complaint.
Right.
And it's going to be we got a sign. And
right.
I go, cool, I got a sign too, and it's a store policy is one that comes up all the time. And I go, great, I'd like to see a copy of the store policy so I know what rules I have to follow. Of course, there's no such written store policy about any of it. Well, it's an insurance regulation. Okay, well, great, then I'd like to see a copy of the insurance regulation so I know what I can do. And it just kind of goes like that. And it's just weird to me. Howard County, when I was living in Columbia for about just till recently, for about 30-some years, I actually had the library look it up for me to what I was allowed to do. Because normally it's a question of, that's a health. That's the other one. It's a health department regulation.
Right.
And I go, do you know the head of the Maryland Health Department? Because I do. My mom used to work for him. It's like, would you like his number? He'll tell you they don't care about the food buyers. They're concerned with the food handlers.
Right.
Sure.
And then it was like, well, we're going to call the police. It's usually that was number 5. and it's only gotten that far a couple times, literally in 40 years or so. And usually, and I would say, okay, well, I'll finish shopping while you call them, and we'll straighten this out once for all when they get here. And then usually they don't come,
right.
And I've always only thrown out twice, actually, like I mean, literally, my milk and eggs sitting at the cash register at Safeway, and which I had shopped in for years. My daughters had ballet lessons in the same little shopping center, so I was usually picking up bread, milk, and fruit like every time we were there. I must have been in there 100 times, and all of a sudden it was a problem this day for whichever security guard was on.
Right.
And it's like, and so I left. Wouldn't even let me take my, buy my stuff, and kick me out of the place. And both them and Best Buy, which were the two stores that really gave me, I don't say that.
And Best Buy's carpeted.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
There's no health code violation.
Well, it was just odd because it would, and again, both cases, some upper vice president or regional vice president called me to apologize the following day.
Nice.
Wow. Because they knew I don't say they were wrong. It's like they were literally unenforceable what they were doing. Like the Safeway, for example, said, it's a private property. I went, no, it's part of the Columbia Association. Literally, the Columbia Association owns the land on which your store is. And I'm a homeowner here. Right. I'm a member of the Columbia Association, so I'm part owner. Like, I would get real belligerent about some of it. And I try to keep my voice down and make the other guy look like he was the screaming idiot, and I would be the calm guy. But anyway, it's rarely been a problem.
You're the Ron Swanson of walking around with no shoes on.
Well, it's just so unique. I mean, it's so unique that you've done it your whole life.
I won't say it unfortunate, but it overshadows any other ability I have.
That's bullshit. Now listen.
But it is because people, you'll say, who are you playing with such and such a band? And you'll mention a name like, oh, he's a great guitar player. You'll mention some singer. And you just mention my name, they go, oh, the guy that doesn't wear shoes. Right. Like, they never go, oh, the keyboard player. It's
no. So
that's why we started off with it.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bury the hatchet. Okay? I wanted to bury the shoe hatchet because in all seriousness, I led off with that at the radio station. Sure. But number 2 topic was you're in a Steely Dan tribute band. And Steely Dan is my Graceland, and so once
Technicolor Motor Home.
Technicolor Motor Home, the Steely Dan tribute band.
Well, I'm very fortunate, both the people that were willing to jump on that bus,
Right, it's unbelievable. Now, we'll get there. Let's go in order a little bit here, just so, what was your first instrument, Glenn?
Well, I started taking piano lessons when I was young, but I think trying to pick it was either that or in elementary school. What they said, what do you want to play? I said, I want to play drums. Mm-hmm. And they said, we're not teaching drums this year. Mm-hmm. What else would you like to play? And I said trombone. And then they said, we don't have any. Here's a trumpet. And so I played trumpet all the way through 10th grade.
Wow.
Badly.
Yeah, but now...
and then I switched to mallet percussion for my 11th grade year, my final year.
Did you at least understand, like, notes and stuff? Or you?
Well, again, I started taking piano lessons around the same time. I was 8 years old.
I got you.
And I've always been... My folks will tell you that it's, I was always around when there was music around. And my folks were very... very musically inclined.
I got you. Did any of them play, or they just were so
Both of them actually played piano, though. I didn't take lessons from either them and my dad was actually almost a phenomenal, really. My mom was like a pop song player.
Nice.
And her grandmother was her mother was a piano teacher.
It's a unique talent to be able to write or to be able to come up with like distinct pop melodies that will
it's
just
fascinating.
catch.
I mean, just reading about you, it looks like you can almost play anything.
Without sounding cocky about it, there was a point, and that's when I was mentioning this to Ben Sherman the other day, a guitarist who's in the Steely Dan band with me. We play in another group now together, and we've got a lot of drive time back and forth to the ocean, so we tell a lot of stories. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, I got to some point when I was in my 20s where 25, 28, something, where I thought I'd learned like the hardest thing you could possibly ever play. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I kind of realized, with enough practice, I can play anything. Mm-hmm. Question is, do I want to put the effort into learning this piece or that piece or whatever it was? But I know it wasn't a question of ability; it was a question of practice.
Sure. And that's a distinct level once you hit that.
Yeah, it was pretty. I won't say obvious at the time, but it was certainly a moment of accomplishment.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
I thought I don't have to go learn these stupidly hard pieces that I may or may not like. Or even if I want to, it's like, but I know if I put the effort in, my dexterity or whatever can make it happen.
The idea that you can, if you want to.
Which almost freed me from having to, some of the things. I can just learn the things I want to, or write the things I want, or make up. And it was but yeah, and I hate to say I don't lack in confidence. It's just one of those things that if you give me the task, I'll put my head down, I'll learn it. or fix it or whatever it has to do. So
Right.
Yeah, that's a good way to be.
Yeah.
So you're taking piano lessons, the trumpet, then you go to mallets. Is that what you said?
Mallets was 11th grade. I was so bad at the trumpet. For years I don't know why they kept me. I was always the number, third or fourth player. The guy, I didn't play the melody part. I was the trumpet player part 3 or part 4, and I had a range that was like barely off I couldn't even get to the top of the staff. I mean, it was
what did
bad.
it occur to you at these years? Yet rock and roll or any band type
No,
stuff? Or you were just doing it for
I was
school?
taking piano lessons when I was like 8 or 9, and my folks, I was living in Washington at the time. My father's a priest at the Washington Cathedral, and they decided that I should take lessons at American University and take theory and ear training lessons. Wow. So they obviously thought something of that.
Sure.
So I actually went Saturday mornings and took 2 college courses when I was 8 and 9 years old on theory and ear training.
I think we've all done that.
And it all made good. It all made perfect sense to me, but it wasn't like thinking. I didn't know where it was going.
Yeah,
it's like
right.
my folks enrolled me in the class, and I rode on my bicycle to the university and sat there with a bunch of 20-year-olds
Good for
and did
them.
what I was doing.
I mean,
Right.
what a clutch move on their
They
part.
were smart people.
In
but-
retrospect, like,
But it wasn't until probably at some point when people were constantly saying, "You're going to be a musician when you grow up." They always ask you, "You're going to be a fireman. You're going to be whatever," and they would say, "You're going to be a musician when you grow up." And at some point, a light bulb went off, and I kind of went, "That's a job.
Right.
Cool. Let's do that."
right, you're like, well, I do that.
That's right. So there was no plan, and it wasn't like any, I listened. I had an older brother who had good musical taste.
Right.
My folks listened to everything.
And in high school, what were your influences?
That's what I was going to
musically?
say.
Well, high school specifically, it was the early, at least my early high school years was, when Elton John was hitting the scene. So all of a sudden there was somebody who wrote stuff that was playable, and and was decent music, and I literally was like, well, I could do that, because we moved to Reisterstown to Maryland, and so I didn't have my piano teacher anymore, and I didn't look for one. Like I wasn't thinking, oh, I need to go. My parents didn't ask me about finding one.
You were feeling confident.
And it was
enough?
I pretty much just stopped playing. We moved, everything. Your whole life changes. All your friends are gone,
Right.
and everything else, and we had still a piano in the house, and I just thought, when that came out, and I had some friends who were had seen Elton John on like his first tour with the trio, and they were just ecstatic about it, and this and that, and we were playing this stuff around, like you do when you share records with everybody else,
Sure.
Right.
and I was like, that sounds like something I could do, and so I just started, first off by ear, and then bought, the Elton John Bernie Taupin songbook. I mean, it's whatever, had the first 2 albums on it, kind of thing.
Wow.
And just pretty much, learned whatever I thought was fun to play.
And what years was it?
So I would have been 9th grade. I would have been 1972-ish,
Nice.
something like that.
So after that, when did you kind of start your musical journey with bands? Like, what was your first band?
First band was right out of high school. With guys I knew in high school. In fact, some guys, if I was to describe where does it begin, there's some friends, also in the Reisterstown area, but Jim Ball and his brother John. And I had a tape recorder that I somehow managed to, my brother had moved away and it was his, and it ended up in my possession. And we played endlessly just with the 2 speeds on the tape deck and overdubbing on things and just making stupid, silly comedy tapes and songs and just sort of farting around with recording. And we had formed a band. Actually, in fact, I just drove past the house coming off Church Road here. A guy named Tommy Core was the drummer, and a bass player who I also ended up working with, and my buddy Jim and his friend Andy. And we put a band together that all we did was practice for about 3 months, never got a job. Right. I mean, it was the middle of winter, and we were practicing in the back of a pool house or something at one of these. But it was literally, I just drove past the house. I haven't been here 30 years.
Awesome.
It was funny. And it was, again, we were learning whatever was popping on the radio, and it was leaning towards the country rock or rock stuff. And, it was Crosby, Stills and Nash, and I can't remember. I mean,
like
just
mid-70s.
Just like
early
a
70s.
like a cover band, though.
Yeah, but a cover band. Yeah. Well, but we did do silly things. And then shortly after, I started playing, I was playing talent shows and things like that. In fact, we would go to Rosewood Mental Hospital and do presentations for the the clients. I'm trying to figure what's
Nice.
the collect.
Right.
The patients, I guess.
Well, yeah. Well, at the time they were inmate. I mean, they were living there.
Right.
So this was like and we would put together the local. I don't know if it was a local. I don't remember who put them together, whether it was school put them together or somebody outside just trying to do community stuff. But we would, so sometimes it was a band, sometimes it was a guy doing a comedy skit. Sometimes like I would play piano and play and sing 2 songs or something. And then I realized that the other guys, when the band broke up that never was a band, it never had a name. I mean, literally, we literally had
I was going to ask what the name was.
We had an FM radio that the bass player would take apart and wire the amplifier into a speaker so we could have a speaker system.
Wow.
And then at the end of the day, he'd unwire it and put the FM radio back together. That was our PA.
Right.
It was like, it wasn't, we're talking... It wasn't a band,
right?
But
yeah, but you probably got some good.
We learned how to play.
Right, like
playing
good
with
time.
playing by yourself and playing with people is a completely different thing.
100%.
I would imagine.
And so, but I started doing some of these, like they'd have Reisterstown Festival or something, and they'd have a stage, and you could just sign up and play for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And some of these 3 of the other guys from this band had formed a trio, just as an acoustic trio, and they started to get work doing things. And then they added a drummer, and then one of the guitar players, decided to leave. And I had been working with Jim. We were writing stupid songs, just not really a band. We would just go over each other's houses and make stuff up. And we started.
When you say stupid songs, you don't mean like Weird Al, or
no,
you just mean like they just weren't good, or
no, they were like either comedy related
Right, okay.
or they were sexual innuendo
vulgar,
or
right?
vulgar
I dig
or whatever.
it. Okay,
right.
so good. I dig
It's
that.
like and luckily I can't remember most of the names.
No, please do.
But,
we are R-rated
we need to
show.
find these tapes.
Yeah, it was later when Jim finally wrote what I thought was the epic song from that period, which was called Raunchy Cave Love.
Nice.
But that's
it's like
That
Shakespeare.
sounds like a Zappa song.
it was a great song.
Right, it does sound
Raunchy
like
Cave
a
Love.
Zappa
But
song.
so Jim was writing songs and we mostly, and I came over and recorded some stuff with him. And we're talking about recording. We like, the mics that were in the room, and we pushed record and we played.
Right, archaic.
Yeah.
recording.
And then, and it sort of blossomed from that, where they had to get a drummer, but they got a drummer to join their trio because they got hired for like a high school dance.
Oh shit,
they needed a drummer, and then so now they were a band with a drummer, and then I started sitting in, and then the one guitar player left, and that band went on. Well, the formation of that band went on for the next 20 years. So,
and what was the name of it?
That was called Spring Wind. Was the original name?
Spring Wind.
Yes. And it was leading towards, it was started off, country rock. It's not what I think what people think it is today, but it was, pure Prairie League and Marshall Tucker Band and Neil Young and Stephen Still stuff. But also we would do Hank Williams stuff, and we would do Johnny Winter stuff, and we would do Frank Zappa, and we would do Tom Waits, and we would do, we did anything we felt like.
An eclectic run.
It got to be a little bit of everything.
Right.
And,
have you always been a good singer?
Well, thank you for thinking I'm a good singer.
Well, I mean, you could sing.
Are you the singer in Technicolor?
Yeah, I do sing most of the.
Yeah, I mean, like he's a singer.
Yeah,
you're a good singer, bud.
It's funny because I get a lot of compliments on it more in the past 5-10 years more than ever.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's like just become a thing.
Interesting.
People, which is again, it's humbling because I try to sing well. But I think, like a lot of musicians, it's easy to be very critical of yourself, and particularly in the moment. Like that end of that line was, I can't believe I tailed that off bad, or I couldn't hold that note, or I ran out of breath, or whatever else you're doing. And again, something else, a conversation I had just recently where I said, it's funny when you're you've had a gig, and happens to this day, where you just know the gig was terrible. You did, you blew about 10 things or 20 things or whatever it was, or the band just wasn't firing right or something, everything was off, something, whether it was you or the band or whatever, it's not even who the blame is to. And somebody who has seen you dozens of times comes up and goes, man, you guys are really on tonight.
We've talked about that.
And the opposite, when you think, man, we are killing it tonight. And again, someone who has seen you many, many times comes and goes, man, things were just a bit off. And
things are off.
And it's like, so I take that much more to be whoever the person's attitude or mood of the day is way more influential than what I might have thought of it or they might have thought of it or anything else. So, but it's just funny how like I said, it happens to most of us at one point or another.
Yeah.
But I I sang I've been singing since I was a little kid.
So, but you never really put the time in like the other instrument, or like
I've never had any vocal lessons or anything.
Right.
But again, I was singing in elementary school. I remember being, I won't say totally embarrassed, but the Broadway play or movie at the time of Oliver was out, which is a musical, and my elementary school teacher made me sing Oliver sings a song to his missing or dead mother called "Where Is Love," and you're an 8-year-old, 10-year-old boy singing in front of kids, this romantic song about death, and so that was probably I don't say this. It was nerve-wracking.
Right, it was a trial by fire. But
she liked my voice, and I remember her at the time saying, as you get older, you're going to have different. I remember specifically her, Miss Teskey, if you're listening. You're going to have different voices, and I didn't understand what she meant, but I think she meant more like having a head voice or a falsetto and a bassier voice and this and that. So you're going to have some stylistic, possibilities. Because I was a boy soprano. I mean, I was. Right. I mean, that's what my voice was like, something like that. And then my voice changed like they all do when we get to that age, and I could sing about 3 notes. I could sing from the D to the F on the piano. I literally, I couldn't go any higher and I couldn't go any lower. It's like most people's voices get
you were locked in.
Most voices go get lower. Right. Mine just lost the top end. I couldn't sing Happy Birthday or Twinkle Little Star. I didn't have enough range. And then later it opened up a bit, but every band I've been in, I sing.
Right. Well, I know that. That's why I said, have you always been a good singer?
Well,
but it's
I've always been a singer.
Yeah, a competent singer.
Well, I like to. And again, I think when we listen to early recordings, particularly with Spring Wind, which again, they changed the name to the Off the Wall, and we were that for 17 years under that moniker. And at the time when we finally finished our little run, we'd done everything we were going to do, and everybody had kids, and we were all busy people, and
right.
And we were just, I don't say spinning our wheels, but we weren't going to get anywhere else where we had been, and we had done a lot of great things, but the band slogan at the time was the band that won't go away. It's like it had been 20 years together,
right?
And just where you can't get rid of us, But we were all weak. When I listen back to some of the recordings, even from the first, because I used to take a microphone into a bar and stick it on top of a pinball machine, record the band.
Right.
And in between songs, you can hear the pinballs ringing. I still have those tapes. They're hilarious to me. But it always amazes me how both ambitious we were, particularly vocally. We would have 5 of us would sing. And we would try to do these really complicated things that, we were barely capable of.
Like Crosby, Stills, and Nash
or
style.
beyond, and moving parts. And then I listen back to them and go, wow, I'm amazed. Whereas that now I think we were as good as
you were pulling it off.
Almost pulling it off.
That's awesome.
And then same thing when you listen to old recordings that we did, studio recordings we did. Same sort of thing where you think, wow, that's, I won't say better than I remember, but it was, I can't believe we were that good at that point when I thought we weren't quite getting there.
Right.
So, and it's nice to have the distance where you don't remember every wrong note, every bad, glitch in your throat or whatever else is going on. You have a little bit more distance.
Anecdotally, whenever I listen back to nights where I'm positive that I shit the bed and it wasn't a good night, I listen back and I'm always like, holy shit. It always is just a little bit better than I think,
I'm always that guy where you're like, man, I was off. I was terrible. I'm like, you weren't though.
Yeah, I'm always.
I think I'll say the self-critical aspect of it, I think, is a testament to the fact that most of us want to be better. Mm-hmm. We wish we were better. We try to be better. We work at being better.
Yep.
Right.
And we're always disappointed when the mark's a little less than whatever it is, Yeah.
And
we can't all be the Olympic winner who with a 1,000th of a second in front of us.
Sure, and not to mention if we were, we'd be assholes.
Yeah, I do the same thing with sculptures and stuff. I can't stop until my wife usually tells me to stop because it looks as good as it's probably going to be, or I'm going to keep working on it and change it until all of a sudden it just becomes something entirely different.
I think that's part of almost any art.
Yeah,
it's like literally to know when is it done.
Yep.
I don't care whether it's a sculpture or a song or anything else. Right.
Or the band.
I probably have, more. I'm not much of a songwriter. I write music, and and I come up with things that I really enjoy, but a lot of them aren't things that you could play for somebody because they don't have an end or a lyric. Or
Right.
But there's lots of these sort of snippets of things that I still enjoy playing and doing. But just knowing when is it over?
Right.
It's
do
tough.
even if you've written the song, if you were recording it, does it need that one extra vocal part? Does it really need the tambourine right there? Or does it really, it can be nothing. Sometimes it's just window dressing, and sometimes it's something that's substantial that makes makes whatever you're working on finish.
Right.
But
Yeah, that producer shit is tricky because it's like I would never trust myself. Like, like you're saying, a tambourine over whatever, it's like I always feel like I just don't trust myself. I feel like I would always feel like I'm overkilling.
I've had some really good people that record in the studio, particularly working with, and live sound engineers too, but usually studios where, it's a little more focused, where I feel like their suggestions to me either push me a little bit where I wouldn't push myself, or they see something good where I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Right.
Or they're identified that it is good or is not, or needs work. And I think an example, Bill Miller was one of the first that I ever worked with like that. And both John Ball, Jim's brother, excellent at that. And Dave Nichodsky, who ran Invisible Sound for many, many years, just really good, not just engineers, but also on the producing side, and would bring things to your attention that, like, did you mean to do that? Which sometimes sounds, like not a left-handed compliment, but
condescending
right.
or something. Right.
But when they were trying to serve the song, or Bill Pratt's another one comes to mind, lived not too far from here as well. But he was always about serving the song, and it would be, does it make the song better? Does it do? And sometimes you're a little flat here, or you're a little rushing the beat, or you're listening. And then sometimes I listen back and I go, you're absolutely right. And then every once in a while I go, yeah, but I like it that way.
Right.
Or I'm glad you brought it to my attention, but I think that suits the material. Mm-hmm. And in most of these cases, the person who brought it up would simply drop it. Right. They weren't there to beat you over the head that, no, I'm right and you need to fix this. It was like, okay, well, at least you've been made aware. Move on. Let's do the next thing.
Right. So to keep you in check, just to make sure you're seeing all the angles. Chris is a great producer, too. He's a little bit curmudgeonly, but, he's a great producer.
And sometimes people outside your own brain can look at the project a little differently than you can, And I like working with other people. Rick Wachowski, same thing. When I work at his studio, I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting people that mattered in this world. But yeah, when I always felt like sometimes when I work with somebody like that whatever I ended up with on tape was better than what I would have gotten by myself. Right. Whether they had an idea they had an idea, but I could execute it. They couldn't. Their concept for something would lead me somewhere, and then they would go, yeah, like that, or
Yeah, the hallmark of a good producer is like if the artist feels like, man, that was good. Like you feel a little on edge because, like you said, they push you a little bit, but it's not like an obnoxious bully push. It's more of a make sure that you're. Hey, you good? And then you move on.
And I think we all probably, at least I write stuff for myself as well, but there's times when I feel like if I'm writing a song or writing a piece of music, and I feel like everything I'm doing sounds just like the last thing I did. Right. And you get disappointed. And a year later, I'll listen back to the same stuff and go, I couldn't write something like that again if I wanted to.
Right.
like it was like, so I've learned to just go, well, even if it sounds like what I did yesterday, I'm going to do it now, because that moment is going to go away. Right. And sometimes I listen to old recordings and I think, what was I thinking? And I mean that in a good way, not usually, oh God, what was I thinking? Right. But like, wow, that was really interesting. I would have never thought of that now.
Right, like how the hell
it's either I'm either beyond it or underneath it or beside it or something. My approach would have been so different. Wow. But it's like, it's just fun to sort of discover that about, there's this sort of moment in time. And that's one of my favorite things about music in general. Is unlike on some of the physical arts, and I know, again, I listened to your first podcast, so it was all about that, which I didn't know there was video. I think I told you.
He texted me, he didn't know there was video. I was like, God damn, you got to watch it.
Because they're talking about the monster masks and everything, and the predator and alien stuff. But there's a point where you went, a lot of physical art, painting or sculpture, whatever, when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
The movie's finished, it's finished. But a song's not like that.
Right.
There is the album recording, but there's also, you can play it when you go out and play it live. You can play it slower. You can play it faster. You can strip it down to just one instrument.
Right.
You can add vocal harmonies. You can get rid of it.
So that's what I love about live music. I mean, I've seen bands where they're big bands too, and I mean their studio album. You go see them live, and you're just hearing the studio album. Yeah. They don't mix it up. They don't really change anything. You're just hearing what you hear on the album. And
the first time I saw the Eagles was like that. It was in 74 or something. Right. And every song was extended or different or faster or slower.
Yeah, I love that.
And then later they put out a live album, and it was almost note for note exactly like the records. And I thought, what was the point? The live show 8 years before, at least from my taste, with these wild guitar solos and whatever else they were doing, it was.
You take chances. And, the music is alive.
You listen to any Zappa recording where the same song exists in 10 different albums over different periods, and it's like he just threw it in a blender every time. And you knew what the song was, and you knew the critical parts, but it's like, man, it's like this song works all of these ways.
I remember that occurred to me on Let's Make the Water Turn Black. Yeah. That is a couple of that there's a slow version of that, and it's got such a distinct harmony or melody, and then all of a sudden I hear this real slow, that and I'm like, what the hell is it? And then I look on the track, and it's Let's Make the Water Turn Black, but it's like 10 years later.
Right. Or they're doing it as instrumental.
Right. He slowed it down.
But I love that. It's great.
It's great.
I saw one of the Zappa alumni groups not too long after he died, which was at the time was called Band, BANNED, Band from Utopia.
Wow.
And Tommy Mars, it was almost all Zappa alumni except the guitar player. Chad Wackerman, Tom Fowler, Bruce Fowler, Kirk McGettrick, Tommy Mars, Ike Willis was the singer, and then the guitar player, I can't remember. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
And they did a version of Idiot Bastard Son where Tommy Mars had just taken it to the jazz extreme of chord extensions and this and that. Yet the melody was still perfectly, and if you don't know the song, people that don't know, it's actually a very beautiful song.
It is.
Even though it's a very strange lyric and whatever. And I'm thinking, it was such a incredible reimagining of this thing.
I love that.
And I don't know if there's a recording of it anywhere, but I remember in the moment sitting at the Birchmere having this, having Bruce Fowler's spit valve over my table, literally, who I had met because I was running a user group for a keyboard company. He was one of my contacts. He wanted to try to get sample library stuff that I had at the time. And
holy shit.
And so it's like I got to go down to see the show and meet him afterwards and stuff. But it was like, watching them, these guys who had already done these songs 12 different ways, doing them more different ways.
Right.
Or sticking to the traditional or one of the arrangements or the other. And as many of the Zappa bands, it was never the same band every time, but sometimes the people would go away and they would come back, so they'd be playing with different people, so they'd harmonize in different ways. And anyway, that to me, that sort of elastic, amorphous,
I love it.
ever changeable medium is still what fascinates me with music. And
well, part of the concept of the show, as you may have known, is that rhythm is everything. And if everybody pays attention to rhythms of anything, the universe, your heart, the algorithm, the rhythms of the music, the rhythms of the editing of the film, everyone would really benefit from that. And so I love the vibe that you're on with that. Ward Davis, you got
it's awesome. So it sounds like we're kind of into the 80s now, where you started getting busy.
We had the first band, we had actually done some recordings, our first time in the studio, like in 77, a real studio. And songs from the maybe second session we did. And we were over ambitious early on. I mean, we not knowing what we're doing, we decided in an 8-hour day we were going to record 6 songs. Right. Which again not multi-track, thing. But we weren't even organized to do what are you going to do in what order? The engineer asked, and it's like, they arrange. So this song, what's the instrumentation for that, and what's the instrumentation for that? And he was asking all the right questions. He goes, these two have the same instrumentation, so we're going to record them back to back. Then I need to move microphones over to here so we can use the piano instead of the organ or whatever, or the acoustic guitar instead of electric guitar. And he kind of organized our session, so we actually managed to finish the songs within the 8 hours that we did, including vocals and whatever else.
That's impressive.
Well, it was, and the band was, we knew what we were doing, kind of, but the next time we went in, we booked 2 days, and half as many songs. We only booked 3 songs.
Nice.
Because we knew we wanted, because having listened to this stuff for like 3 or 4 months and finally collected enough money to go back in the studio, we knew that we needed to pay more attention to some of these things. And by the 3rd session, we spent 2 days on one song, just because we really wanted to. And then there's a point where then we got better. So we got better at working in the studio faster, and that kind of went the other way around. But from those first, second or third session, at the time, 98 Rock was a young radio station in Baltimore. Yep. And the sort of big boy on campus in the FM world was WKTK, the Rock of Baltimore. And both of them, within a month or 2 of each other, had decided to put out local band albums. And us and one other band group called Climate Donkey were the only ones that got picked for both records. And I'm not sure that everybody submitted to both, but we happened to be chosen for both. But there were groups like Holland's Ferry, which was Robbie Fahey's group at the time, and Both Worlds, this group out of Towson State and Towson University, whatever it was called that time. They keep changing the name every 8 years. I can't figure it out. And a lot of those people, they're still playing. Like and Tony Sciutto's band was on the one album, and Apricot Brandy, which featured the keyboard. Brandy, I remember that featured the keyboard player Jordan Rudess, who is been a member of Dream Theater now for so long. And but it was just like all of a sudden you're on 2 records,
right?
And the radio's playing your songs, on 2 different radio stations, and you're going.
Now, what age?
We've had the big time.
What age was that?
I was been 70. It's got to be 78 or 9, because again we changed drummers in 78, because we changed drummers in 79. It's the only personnel change the band ever had. Was that. So
79 would mean
78,
that you were...
that we changed. That's when we changed the name. We got a new drummer, and we changed the name of the band to Off the Wall. And so this was all with the first drum. But we had put on live show. We tried to record our first album as a double live album of all original material.
Wow.
Like we
were balls.
We were not unambitious.
A double live album.
You said you tried. You did not succeed.
Not our fault.
Right.
The recording studio messed up. They totally messed up. And we had planned little 12 and 14-minute blocks of songs with a cover song in between, so that they could change reels, because reels of tape were 15 minutes.
Wow.
And we planned it all out to do all this, and we had all this original material we do, and they totally screwed the pooch on that. And But again, somebody saying, "Oh, should never do that," and our band, the attitude was usually "Watch me," like and we would try anything. I'm fearless in that sense. I mean, the band, and it was just fun because there was never a safety net. We didn't care. It was. And
do you have is there recordings out there now?
Oh yeah,
of this band?
I've still got them all.
Nice.
I tended to be the guy who brought the tape recorder to the gig. So, and still to this day, I'm the guy who nowadays bring a laptop and plug into the board. But and I usually want to record. I recorded an awful lot of live stuff for a variety of reasons. But the 2 probably regular ones weren't to see how impressive we were. It was to see what we were doing right and what we were doing wrong. Right. And every band makes mistakes every night. That's not a problem. But when you realize, hey, every time we get to this section, somebody hits the wrong chord, or you're on the wrong note, or somebody's missing this note in the middle that nobody's singing, It's not just this one night. It happened 3 times in a row. Okay, that's something we need to fix. Right. And so I wanted to know where could we improve on things.
Right. That's actually, that kind of self-critique is the difference between the men and the boys when it comes to being a good band or... Yeah, and it doesn't have to be perfect. That's the other thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's... Right. But you want it to have energy and the right feel and whatever. But you also don't want to know, hey, that's really a major chord there. Or the other way around, that's really a minor chord. Sure. I hear people play, even years ago, playing Louie Louie, which is the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the minor 5, not the major 5, which is the difference between Hang On Sloopy and Louie Louie. Right. It makes a major difference.
It's a huge difference. Right. And you'd hear people do it, and I would just go, how can you not tell it's wrong? But as lucky, not a band I was in.
Right.
But again, I'm coming home from the gig. Well, I was in Ocean City last night, so I was driving home from after the gig, because no hotel room, and and we're talking about and again Ben was sitting with me, and he's saying, on this song, this patch is a little louder than that one, and it is in this song, and so it's like we've been playing together now in this band for about 6 months or so, but it's like good. I want to know that. I want to know that. there's an imbalance here, or there's a thing somebody has to deal with. And we don't work with a sound man most of the time with this Sons of Pirates band.
Sons of Pirates.
So it's but again, it was so you kind of need to self-regulate like that. But anyway, so your question, when we're starting with we're getting into the 80s. What are we doing now?
So I saw that there's a couple of things.
This is, by the way, this is my style. It's tangential.
We love that. That's our
great
style.
Without a style that
you
isn't
made me nervous there. You're like, back to your question. I'm like, oh shit.
You said, what's
did
my
he not
question?
answer my question?
It was something about the 80s.
No. So I was just reading that you were. I mean, I don't know if this is the exact time frame, but you were one of the early adopters of MIDI technology. You started a company called the Frequency Sound Music Laboratory. That was 85.
Yeah, that's when I officially started doing that. I got my first computer. Well, I had an Atari that I learned to program.
Oh,
on,
shit.
Right.
That was an Atari, I don't remember, 800 or something. It was it didn't have no cassette storage, no hard drive,
right.
No nothing. You'd type the program into the 64K of RAM, and then you'd run it on your television set because no monitor, it was a TV. And then when it would work, you'd go, great. And then you'd hit the off button and it would erase everything that you had.
Right.
Hold on, Glenn.
And that's how I learned it.
Hold on, Glenn. What the fuck are you talking about? Are you talking about an Atari?
Atari 2600, not the video game console.
No,
it was a computer.
It was a computer, and it looked not much different than just the keyboard, but the computer was inside the keyboard.
I actually had a Commodore 64.
Right, similar to that.
Yeah.
But did somebody teach you how to program, or
no,
you just were like, I just all of a sudden could program?
No, it was a couple different things. My wife and I had our first kid in '82. And I thought, and I was house papa, because somebody had a real job and the other guy was a musician.
Sure.
So the one that had the real job kept doing that,
right.
And
you had to do chores. Right?
Well, I was so I was house papa, and I thought, the one thing I didn't do in high school that I had kind of wanted to do was there was a business class, there was a typing class, but I got out of high school a year early. Not for anything bad. It was like if you had all your credits, you could leave if you were in 11th grade at the time.
Right.
And the only thing I was missing was 12th grade English. So I simultaneously took 12th and 11th grade English in my 11th grade year. But I had to drop the typing class to pick it up. But I realized that was when whoever I talked to said, you can be done. It's like, good.
You said, what?
Get out of here. So I thought, well, I was going to teach myself to type. And so I got up. My wife. There was whatever that model was. They were on sale for something stupid at the time, and we're talking about a young couple with a kid with no money. And
right.
But
sure.
Mary ponied up for the. My mom, Mary ponied up for this for the keyboard. So I got a typing book first, and was just practicing. You type things just on the home row, and then you type things using this extra letter
like
and this
find home keys.
Right. Well, that would just be whatever would fit on those 8 letters, and then and so on. But then at the time, there was a magazine called Compute magazine, which actually every month published a working program in programming language, either in BASIC or whatever the language the computers worked in. And they were always a little word processor, a little game, a little sprite thing, a little whatever, just something. Could draw a rainbow on the screen. It wouldn't be anything enormous. But I thought, well, if I'm already just typing nonsense stuff, I might as well start typing useful stuff.
Right, like learning what...
I was literally just, and it's a lot of, so that was, typing words is very different than typing computer code because there's a lot of brackets and colons and,
and they all mean something.
And they mean something. If you do it wrong, it doesn't work.
Right.
It's, it's kind of like not putting the wheels on the car before you take it out. And so I kind of learned some programming stuff sideways like that because I would type in these 2-page programs or 4-page programs, whatever, just practicing my typing skills. And then I would hit run or whatever it was and it would crash or stop. And so I had to go back through the pages and find out what did I miss? Where did I type wrong?
Right.
And then sort of through that kind of figured out where, this is telling it to go from here to here. And this is a subroutine going over here. And so I just sort of poked through a lot of code like that. And
so did being a keyboard player help with this?
No.
No.
I
feel like it would.
I approached it as touch typing, though. So I didn't want to be looking at my hands.
Right.
And my dad could type 120 words a minute. He had an IBM electric typewriter in the '60s that nobody had.
Right.
That, and he would just whip through stuff. And I remember spending like 9 hours typing my one 10-page term paper on it once, just going, thinking, God, this is...
No, I mean, typing is still a skill.
It is.
It's still a skill you learn today.
And if we could get, even the speech-to-text stuff, if we could occasionally get it to do the right thing, and it actually is amazing that it works as well as it does.
Mm-hmm.
But I love it when I look at it and it's exactly right, and I hit the send button, and right before I hit the send button, it changes 3 words. And it's like, you had it right. But so I started doing that, and just, and then I started making stupid little programs of my own the Atari had a 4-voice synthesizer in it, or at least 4 notes it could play at the same time. Not really synthesizer, I guess, per se, but it would make tones. Right. And I would started taking like little Bach inventions and things like that, or melodies, and finding out how I could, tell the sound chip to play this note for this long, and the sound chip to play this note, and they would get it to play, a 10-note melody, and eventually I was having it play Bach 2-part inventions, and the computer was so slow that the more you gave it to do, everything slowed down. Mm-hmm. So I would put little timing elements between notes to try and make up for the fact that the computer couldn't keep up with how fast I was making it do things.
God damn, Glenn.
Yeah, that's thinking outside the box.
Put it this way: it was like an Erector set or a Lego set, or it was all these things that did whatever you wanted it to do.
But so at the time, did you see the computer world coming? Like, did you see the onslaught of what was happening?
I was reading an article.
You were like Gandalf, probably. Well, at this moment. I mean, for fuck's sake! Like,
I was lucky in a couple ways on the music and the computer side of things. Right. I was a piano player. I had a piano, and at some point traded in my first organ, which was a Farfisa. I didn't trade it in, but I traded it off the stage for a Hammond B3. And so I was a guy with an 88 key, Yamaha electric grand and an organ, a B3 with a Leslie. I mean, that was, and that was, and have the, hernia to prove it. But as we're seeing, I'm reading this article, and I don't remember which magazine it was in at the time. Probably Mix magazine might be the only one that I was aware of, or even that was a print. But it was talking about what a sampler was, or what a sampling keyboard would be. And I remember some description, probably of I think Todd Rundgren or somebody, talking about how they took a microphone out and they slammed car doors and banged on hubcaps and did everything they could make the car make noise, and then came in and played it like a drum set or turned it into an instrument. And I thought, well, that just sounds way too cool.
Right.
And
it was Rundgren.
I'm pretty sure he was, and there were other people mentioned in the article and stuff too, but just what sampling was and is and could become. And I went to a demo for the then brand new company, Kurzweil, which is Raymond Kurzweil. If you look him up, Kurzweil, invented a music making machine in the 60s, and then invented the reading machine, where you took a book, laid it down on the glass top, and it would read it out loud for you.
Wow.
This was not a dumb guy.
Right.
And he created one of the early sampling keyboards that also had pre-recorded or already sampled sounds in it. And the big boys, the Fairlights and Synclaviers and things like that of the day, were $50,000 to $200,000. Right. His was 10. And there was another Sonic had one that was about $2,000. And then when I looked up samplers, like these are like the maybe 4 or 5 things on the market. EMU probably, the emulator would have been the other one that I can think of. And I went to a demo. Kurzweil was coming to one of the music stores in Washington that's no longer there, and giving a demo on the keyboard. And I thought, well, I'll go see what it's all about, because we were just starting a studio down in Baltimore. Flipside Sound, which ran for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And this year is the
84,
okay.
84, 85. Yeah, 84, 85. And I went to this demo and just, literally just, you're kidding. Like, right. You can do this. And these days, 40 years later, I don't think anybody would be overly impressed with this. But at the time, it was that what they did for the demo, and it's funny because the guy, I'm not an expert at many instruments, but I can make noise with a lot of them.
Right.
So the guy is asking, who out here plays piano? And of course, everybody in the audience, there's 50 of us that are there. How many people play trumpet? How many people play trombone? How many play saxophone? And he goes, is there anything you don't play? I said, if it's got a bow or a double reed, I don't know how to do it. But so they were, and they're doing full. They had at the time, Owner of a Lonely Heart sampled, and it was like on 6 keys, dan 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 dan, and then dan dan dan, boom, boom, and then the whole band, you're going like, how can you do that with 1 key?
Right.
And then they had 2 of them side by side, and they had Rhapsody in Blue programmed for the orchestra on one of them, and a live piano player on the other one doing the piano part. And they basically hit play on the one, and he accompanied himself with 2. And it was like, literally, it was the entire orchestra.
You were like, holy shit.
Exactly. And of course, I think like some people, when you see anything that's way beyond whatever was possible at the time, you thought, think of what I could do with this. And the other half was, what if somebody else gets one first? And I went home. I literally couldn't sleep for a week, like 2 weeks. I say that meaning in all honesty. I couldn't stop thinking about this. How am I going to make this happen? How am I going to make this happen? And at the time, it came out, was at $10,000. They had just added a sound module and a sampling thing to it, and it was up to $15,000. And I'm driving a $250 Volkswagen.
Yeah,
with no job.
$15,000 in 1984.
Right, and early 1980. For me, by this, it's probably 1985. Yeah. And so I went and lied to 3 banks, and I literally, what do I have to show that I make?
Sure.
And every year, this has got to be a thing for a long time, where I would keep extra tax forms so I could fill in any numbers I wanted to show them, because there was no way they could check it. They couldn't check with the IRS. There was no Experian or Trans, whoever that is, and I just lied to them.
This pre-computer, kids. We lied.
Well, it was, and again, none of them would give me $15,000 because again, I didn't have a job.
Right.
I was in a band, and my poor wife put up with this. But 2 of the banks each said they'd give me 5 instead of 15, and one of them said they'd give me 7. And so I literally, within the same hour, went to all 3 banks and picked up all 3 loans.
That's all.
And because they didn't ask me when I came to pick up the second loan, have you taken any loans out in the past 5 minutes?
Right.
Because if you had, we wouldn't approve you anymore. And I thought, well, that'll give me a little bit of a cushion for like if I can't make the early payments. And I rented myself out. Basically said, you get me and you get this ridiculous machine, and it does these things that if you've seen the edge of it, you'll know what I'm talking about in the studio market and stuff. And I said, you get me as a player, you get the machine for 8 hours, and you buy me lunch, and I get $250. And I paid off the machine in a year.
That's
amazing. Fucking awesome.
Yeah. And I knew nothing about, other than the little bit of computer programming I had done. And, literally typing things out of whatever.
But like right place, right time type stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
like
you could see
5 years
writing.
later, it would have all been,
Do you still have this thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
In fact, it has a new life, thanks to a friend of mine, Jim Jones.
Yeah.
At some point, this thing, it looks like a spaceship. It looked modern in the 80s, but it looks like it's from the 50s now for some reason. Sure. But it has a foot pedal that actually was the power supply, and it's this thick and this big, like 2 feet by a foot wide with the sustain pedal on it, and a multi-pin cable that comes out and powers the big ass keyboard, which is 95 pounds by itself, which was lighter than the B3 and the piano. So I could carry.
And the pedal is probably
this big hunky solid metal thing.
At
some point in the past 5-10 years, my pedal stopped working, and they made the thing for 30 years. So I moved it to we just moved recently. I moved it to the new house and carried it there and set it all up and thought, I really got to figure out how to get this fixed at some point. And a friend of mine who runs a music studio and teaching school called the Music Workshop right near the Senator Theater downtown, named Jim Jones. He's been there for 30 years. Jim and I have gotten to be really good friends over the years, and we did have done a lot of stuff together. But he says, Paul Schaefer, the keyboard player on David Letterman's show for many, many years, is selling all this equipment. It's online. You can just order it. and buy it. And he said, and he used to work, Jim used to work at Kurzweil. He used to do assembling some of these things because he was at school in Boston and where the company is, or in Massachusetts. And he goes, so I just bought Paul Schaefer's Kurzweil keyboard from the same model, same thing. And I went, he goes, yeah, it's got a certificate of authenticity and everything, and it was one price, including shipping. And it came, and I said, that is just so cool.
Yeah, that's
like,
wild.
I can't believe that not only that you finally got one, that he wanted to have one in his, because he's got a good collection of a variety of things anyway. So you finally, but you actually have the one that was on TV for 30 years or whatever it was. And he goes, I just moved, and I stand, mine's still broken, or like I got to find somebody to fix the foot pedal and stuff and this. And Jim hears this, and I go down to something within a week or two to go down to see him for something else. And he goes, by the way, I got something for you. And he pulls out one of these foot pedals. I said, where did you get that? And he goes, Paul was also selling the one, not just that was on the show, but the one he toured with.
Wow.
I bought it so you could have the pedal.
Holy
that's
shit.
a good friend right there.
And then he goes, now we've both got a spare.
That's awesome.
And I went,
Jim Jones for the win,
Yeah.
baby.
so the question is, does it
incredible.
work? Yes, it does.
That's awesome.
Good for you. And you got Paul Schaefer's.
I plugged
Yeah.
the thing in, and I am just shaking, pushing the power button, going, when it goes click, is it going to actually come on?
Right.
Because I could have been wrong that it was the foot pedal. It might have been something in the
Right,
keyboard.
wouldn't that have been a
Right.
bitch?
I
Right,
know, but
right.
it was
So
actually,
you don't take it out. It just,
I don't anymore, but I was taking it into bars. I mean, I was in 1985. I was playing at EJ Bugs in
Right.
Fells Point with a $15,000 keyboard,
That's
making $100
insane.
because we're musicians.
I mean,
That's
is it worth? I mean, is it worth more than $15,000 right now?
No, it's
to
not.
A collector?
It's and again, he bought each of these for $800 a piece, including shipping.
Paul Schaefer
the
ones.
Paul Schaefer ones for $800 a piece,
Wow.
including shipping.
That's
Because
crazy.
unless you either know what you're doing with it, and it's like a lot of things. There are computers that are faster and better and stronger and jump higher than the other stuff.
Sure.
And if you know what you're doing, it's an interesting, and I love the thing. I mean, because again, I knew how to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's both a nostalgia thing at this point, because it's 85 to now is
right.
It's goddamn long.
It's 30 plus years, right?
Yeah. So,
Yes.
yes.
It's 30
It
years.
sucks.
It's 40
Wait a
years,
minute.
right?
40.
40 years. It's 40
85
years.
was 40 years
85
ago.
is 40 years ago.
Yeah,
It's coming up
God.
on. So,
Yeah.
and again, and it was the first synthesizer I ever bought.
Yeah.
Like,
that's an insane first.
well, that's the other thing
synthesizer.
where people are you. Well, again, I can't tell you how much my wife is such a wonderful.
Yeah, she's got to be
Right,
a
yeah.
saint. I mean,
She'd be-
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, you were married when you bought that.
you're taking out bank loans under sketchy principles and shit.
I was good at that.
It's good stuff, man. It's good stuff.
But anyway, so as a result, I ended up working in a music store because I had to pay for this, for one thing, and we did not have a second child yet. But again, so I thought, well, he was old enough that I could take him to his grandparents or something, and we worked. She worked at Westinghouse till 3:30 in the afternoon, and I was working like 4 to 9 at the store, and we would literally meet in the parking lot and put the kid from one to the
Right,
next.
be like, hey, remember me?
And so we literally we managed to watch the kid. I mean, we never had what do you call it, daycare or anything like that. It was
Right.
always one of us, but I was able to do that at night, pick up some extra money, and then of course it was literally at the time where all these now iconic synthesizers, the analog stuff like the Moog stuff and sequential circuits and our 2600s and things like that were at the height of their popularity, but MIDI was a thing now. And the Yamaha DX7 and the Korg M1 and the EMU, Emacs and emulators and things like this, they were all in the $1,000 to $5,000 range, and a lot of them around $2,000, where that was a lot cheaper than the ones like the Oberheims and the sequentials, which were $5,000 to $8,000.
and for those at home, MIDI stands for
Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And if you want the simplest terms, it's a connecting cable that you can attach more than one thing to, and it essentially makes a small network. Not any different than, say, like a little USB hub that you hook your printer and your camera and your phone to.
But that
but
one
these things
little
can talk to
thing
each other.
in the 80s or late 80s changed or made things way...
It made things that were originally either separate, meaning, for example, if you to this day, if you're a gamer, and I'm not, so you can correct me if I say something stupid, if you are married to an Xbox, you can't take a Wii game and put it in it.
Sure.
Right? Or a whatever.
Right.
They don't. They're completely independent systems. They're proprietary systems. You can't combine the controller from one doesn't work with the other one.
Right.
But the only thing that might is the monitor. Every synthesizer company, these are all, I don't say beginners, but I mean, the guys who developed this became this industry. Tom Oberheim, Bob Moog, Don Buchla.
Because synthesizer is a young instrument compared to the
there
piano.
were electronic instruments too, but when we talk about analog synthesizers, really late 50s, early 60s, gotcha. And again, as best I'm not a historian, but in that ballpark. Right. And these guys, and they weren't businessmen. These were electronic engineers and musicians and tinkerers and stuff. Mm-hmm. So they had developed this thing, and then all of a sudden, some of the big, these electronics companies and actually sequential circuits, the people who make one of the iconic keyboards of the day, the Prophet 5, were one of the companies. Their company had proposed MIDI as a standard. Let's have a standard because you couldn't buy so-and-so's drum machine and hook it up to so-and-so's keyboard. It didn't work. Right. They were all completely independent. Let's have a common wiring system, so hardware connection and language they can talk back and forth to each other so they can speak. And we're all used to networks these days. I mean, the internet, your phone is, everything we do is on a net, not everything, but it's on a network. Yeah. Well, this was a mini network specifically designed for musical instruments, musical instrument digital interface. And it let you take Oberheim stuff, hook it to Kurzweil stuff or Roland stuff or a Linn drum machine, and they would all work together. Wow. And so now things you weren't married to one company and their stuff, but everything was part of a system. Right. So it's more like, again, rather than buying like a good home stereo or entertainment system, you have a tuner and you have an amplifier and you have a receiver and a turntable and a cassette player and a CD player and a Blu-ray player and a surround set of speakers or whatever you got. Those are all component-based systems, not the Kmart boombox,
right. Yeah, right.
Where everything's all in one thing. So you had where everything you had not only was compatible with everything else, but nothing ever became obsolete. Right. So the keyboard that I bought in 1985 still works with today's computer and today's software and every other MIDI device ever made. Right. 40 years later, it was designed that well.
It's brilliant.
Older equipment doesn't get the new features because the protocol, just like USB changes or FireWire and Thunderbolt change, the computer protocols, they don't get the new features. But all the new devices have to maintain compatibility with the original stuff. So everything is part of it. It's like, imagine this microphone all of a sudden going, I'm sorry, you only work with a Behringer console.
Right.
Or you only work with a Shure console or with a Allen Heath or whatever. It's like, it wasn't like that.
Right.
Or once we get to 2000, this stops working.
Right.
It's
like being grandfathered in for the ride.
And MIDI now, for the first time in 40 years, is ratifying MIDI 2.0. I mean, it's which is adding a whole bunch of features, but it includes MIDI 1.0 as part of its overall protocol. Right. But I was working in the music store. It's 85. We have nothing but used equipment. The guy was a guitar store that wanted to do keyboards. And so every week I had whatever was on display. Mm-hmm. Somebody had traded in or he'd bought from them, which is usually when I had a drum machine or two and half a dozen keyboards. And every week it was something different because if we sold one, I didn't have it anymore. And somebody'd sell something in or trade something in, then I had something else. So I was learning new gear all the time, and it was all very infant in terms of its abilities compared to what things do now. And I was just, if there was nobody in the store and I didn't, my work was done, I'd just sit there and read the manuals and make them do stuff.
Right.
And
I mean, that's
so I literally had $100,000 worth of, by the time eventually we became a sequential dealer and a Kawai dealer and an Oberheim dealer and a Kurzweil dealer. And so eventually in 3 years' time, there were a couple companies I never worked for, Yamaha and Roland and a couple others, that we were never, because other people were the dealers. So you couldn't have them across the street from each other and stuff.
Sure.
But I had $100,000 worth of equipment sitting in front of me every day, and somebody else paid for it.
Right.
And I got to play with it anytime.
Yeah, and you had the time to put towards learning each piece of equipment.
It was, to me, again, like the programming thing, it was a puzzle. I liked a good puzzle. Right. And it was my first week in the store, absolutely my first week. Somebody calls, and again, I'm answering the phone because I can't do much else. I don't know where anything is. Somebody call and say, get me a set of strings. I was like, where do they keep the strings? I have no idea. And so I was answering the phone, and this guy, whoever called up, says, I've got such and such a drum machine, and I've got a sequential 600, whatever the model was. And he goes, and the drum machine has a tempo on it. And it'll go boom, at the bat, at the boom, at the bat. And the keyboard has an arpeggiator on it. For those that don't know, if you hold some notes down, they won't just play a chord. They'll go and play whatever notes you have held down. If it's 2 notes, it'll go. If it's 3 notes, it'll go. And he goes, I want the 2 things to work together. So when I hit a chord here and I hit play on the drum machine, they're in time with each other. And I looked over literally at the half a dozen things we had, and I said, I've got one of each of those here. I don't know how to do it, but come on in and we'll figure it out. Because that sounded cool to me.
Yeah, right.
Like that, I never thought of that. I wasn't working with drum machines and stuff. So he came in, and before he'd gotten in, I found out the button, and one of them I had the manual to, I think. And I hooked a MIDI wire from the one to the other, and I hit play on the ones and hit a key, and they went in time, and the guy walks to the door, and I went, come here, you got to see this. This is just really cool. And then that's just kind of how it happened. And somebody would call me the next week with a similar question, and then I was the guy that knew how to do that.
Right.
And it was like, oh, well, you look for this in the manual. It's probably this. And if not, bring it in here, and we'll figure it out. And so I started doing this sort of troubleshooting and teaching kind of thing for people.
Right.
Or just demonstrating stuff. Because you'd be in the store doing something cool, what I thought was cool, or showing somebody, and there'd be 3 other people who'd come around and stick around behind you and go, what's that? And eventually it was just like, we need to have clinics on this stuff. And I talked to the owner. I said, well, let's just have a sign-up sheet by the register. So let's teach people what a sampler is. Let's tell them what a sequencer is, what a drum machine is, whatever. And we put a little sheet by the front of the store. And the store was tiny. I mean, there was really, we could maybe fit 8 people, 10 people in it if I wanted to do something like that.
And where was the store?
This is in Catonsville. At the store at the time, the Guitar Exchange. And we got like 30 or 40 people signed up for this. And it's like, well, we can't do this here. Like, there's no way.
Right.
And we got a little hotel conference room, like at the Howard Johnson's or whatever it was in Route 40. And,
Yep.
Which I'm sure is long gone.
I don't know, but I grew up on Ingleside Avenue.
Okay, so
I remember when it was on fire.
Ingleside was the back side of the store.
Got it.
The other side of that. But but anyway, so we decided. Well, I remember. Of course, I couldn't email people. I had to call everybody on the phone and say it's going to be next Friday at whatever. And I can't remember whatever the first topic was, but I'm thinking, geez, how am I going to talk for an hour or whatever about this? I mean, I'm writing notes down and thinking, oh, here's a good progression of what to learn and what to do in what order. And this, I didn't even get through half my notes in 2 hours because there were so many questions. And people knew so little or never heard it. And of course, now you get on YouTube and there's 10-year-olds who can do
those
this.
Assholes, they have no idea what it used to.
But I mean, it's
what we used to go through. I mean, but it's real.
But a lot of that is we don't have to start from square one every time. That's
brilliant.
why we build on the knowledge of others.
Children. I love the children. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
But and so I started doing these clinics about every 3 or 6 months. Whatever we decided, hey, there's a new thing we should show somebody or whatever, and it was a regular. It was, and also people got to meet each other. Musicians got, and somebody who owned this piece of equipment and had this piece of equipment. And let's get together and let's record.
Were they just free clinics, or did they start
charging? We did it for nothing.
Yeah, that's
nothing.
Awesome.
And there was water, maybe a pitcher of water at the back of the thing.
Sure.
There wasn't. We no coffee and donuts, no nothing. Glenn would stand up there with a little computer and talk about things, and then people would ask questions.
Just out of mere excitement. I mean, for the product.
Well, and it was in the sense when I had gone to the Kurzweil demo, the year or two before. It was the same sort of thing where, the guy just showed something off and it blew me away. Why don't and I wasn't trying to impress people. It's like, they won't buy it if they don't know what it is.
Right.
You hear a word and you go, like if somebody says the internet to you in 1980, what do? You go, huh?
Yeah. Right.
I had an email address in 1985. And I still remember my 70671.454 is my CompuServe address. Don't send anything there. It won't work anymore. But I had a PanNet address and a Genie account and an Apple ID in like 85, 86. So I had 4 different email addresses. And at the time, we paid per character, per 1,000 characters. You paid a penny for every 1,000 characters you sent or received. So
that's crazy.
It was,
I remember the 10-cent text message.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
So there you go. See, and then it was like, I remember long distance calling.
Yeah, me too. We did long distance calling a lot.
Where my long distance bill would be $300.
That's crazy.
So, but anyway, but technology side, the store was a big part of it. First off, was buying this ridiculous equipment,
right,
that I had no business owning, and then diving in,
then
as
deep
much
dive
as I
Then you started,
demonstrating
but
it.
with these seminars, you started selling the equipment.
Oh, well, the nice part, again, I did good work where I was, but people would come in and ask for something. And a lot of times we just didn't have it. There'd be whatever the thing, if somebody came and said, do you have a Stratocaster? And you go, well, we're not a Fender dealer. Of course I don't, But they would ask for something, or do you have a VW? Asking a Ford dealer. Like, you wouldn't. But I would say, well, what do you want it for? And I wasn't trying to be a jerk. It's like, well, somebody says it's the best. And I go, well, the best at what? Like, what do you want to do with it? And they would explain to me whatever their musical, impression was or whatever. And I said, well, I got something that kind of does that. And let me show you, is this what you mean like this? And if it wasn't, it was like, okay, well, I know so-and-so, Gordon Miller, across town, was a dealer for that or whatever. And I said, go talk to Daryl, and he's a good guy. And I wish I could get it for you, but I can't. Or sometimes they would say, oh, well, that does what I do, and it's $500 less. And okay, well, then buy that. But what I ended up with was people who would come to me first because I wasn't bullshitting them about stuff. And,
right, they knew you put the time in, and you knew.
And I
wanted
people to be. I wanted to go out and see good musicians playing well on, who knew what to do with the stuff they had, and if they had any questions, I spent half my day just answering questions. Call me up, I'd look through manuals, I'd do stuff, I'd call them back, and but it was, to me, it was again, it was a puzzle.
Right.
It was like, how do we solve that? And then I started testing for some of the companies, and that was equally as bizarre. Where again, I thought as a computer beginner and a synthesizer beginner, I didn't know what I was doing. Instead, I'm finding bugs right and left because the manual's wrong or the software's got a problem, and
you just started becoming a tester
without my knowledge.
Right.
And in fact, the keyboard is the perfect example, the best example, because that's where it really got me into a whole bunch of other things. They had a new version of at the time it was firmware. This is when you open up your expensive keyboard and you know nothing about electronics, and you pry 32 little chips off of the circuit board, and you put 32 more back in the little...
That was the firmware upgrade?
The firmware upgrade.
Wow.
And then you turn it on and you hope you got all the pins in the right holes and the chips in the right order, and it doesn't blow up and whatever. So I had just done this update about a year into owning this thing. And it was expensive. It was like another $500 to do the software update that added new features and all this stuff, like any upgrade typically does. And all of a sudden, some things that I knew how to do, and literally my manual was the size of a phone book. If you remember what a phone book looked like, this big, and I couldn't get it to do some of the things because all the buttons on the front panel changed what they did. Like literally, they wrote everything about it. So some of that stuff I knew how to do, I couldn't find out how to make it do it. And I used to keep a list. Anytime I ran into a problem, I kept a little list next to my computer that said, ask them about this next time you call tech support. Ask about this next time. Because I either couldn't understand the manual, or I pushed the buttons the manual said and it didn't do what it said it was going to do, or I knew I was doing something. And I thought it was me. Always thought it was me. And I know at some point, and I'm sure anybody I've told this story to before, it's going to get the same... I get the same story out of me, but it's the same one. It's like, I know somebody, when I call them for tech support, they're going, it's that asshole from Maryland again. Because I would ask, I really didn't know.
This prick thinks.
I'd been using a computer for a year and a half and this keyboard, a synthesizer for a year. And I was getting it to do lots of cool stuff. And the guy I got on the phone, I said, I can't get it to do X. And he goes, it doesn't do that. And I went, well, it did in version 2. I just put version 3 in. Can you, I'm trying to get it to do that? And he goes, it doesn't do that. And it went back for a couple more back and forth like that. And I said, well, it used to do it. And he goes, it did not. I said, it never did that. And I said, do you have one there with the old software in it that you can get access to? And he goes, yes, I do. And when I found years later what they had was a huge mainframe computer and a keyboard next to him. He could emulate anything that they were making. I mean, we're talking, this is beyond Star Trek type stuff at the time for computers. So he pulls up apparently the software that I used to have, and I said like, hit this button, it's about 5 or 6 buttons you had hit in a row. And I said, now hit a key on the keyboard. What's it do? And he goes, I can't believe it does that. And I go, well, it's been doing it for me for a year, and that's how I know how to make it do it. And he goes, but it isn't capable of doing this. And I went, cool. How do I get the new one to do it? And I wouldn't let go of that one. And he goes, you really don't understand. I'm the head programmer here. I wrote the software. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why he's answering the telephone, but he was.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's not possible that it does this. And I go, cool, because it was letting it have more voices than
I just told.
cool.
I
It
just
was only allowed
to
to play like 12 notes at a time, and somehow I was getting it to play double that or whatever it was doing. I found a bug. I didn't know it was a bug. Like it was a bug that to me was a feature.
Right.
And the bug unfortunately didn't exist in the newer version. But then I started going down my list of other things. Well, how about when you do this and it does that? And he goes, it's not supposed to do that. I go, well, have you got one there? He goes, that's not how it works. You got one there? That's a bug. And I went through my list about 5 or 10 things with the guy in the next 10 minutes, and the next words out of his mouth are, do you want to work for me?
I was to say, dude, you're like a genius.
I bashed my head against stuff because it would drive me nuts if I couldn't get to work.
Were features that you liked.
Well,
some of them
we call it, the official term is undocumented features.
Sure.
Right.
But so they started sending me stuff to test. And then the way the music business, which is much smaller than people think it is, these people that work for these tech companies at the time, I mean, they're 5 or 10 people maybe working, maybe 20 are a big one. And the big ones like Yamaha are different, because they're an industry.
Right.
They, that's a whole different thing. But these are little companies, that maybe 5, 10, 20 people. And if they lost their job in one, they took a better job at another one.
Right.
So they were all intermingling and doing whatever. So a guy would leave one place and he'd call me up and say, I'm working for so-and-so now. Would you like to test the new X for this? And I ended up working for Oberheim and for Yamaha and for, for Lexicon and for Kawai. And I mean, like a dozen different companies, because somewhere along the line, somebody I had dealt with moved on to somebody else or recommended me to somebody at another company they knew. And so they were calling me, can you test this product? Can you do this thing? It's like, bring it on.
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm a movie freak, and it's like you're like the sneakers. Like if you remember the Robert Redford movie, people would hire them to break into their company to see if anybody could break into their company. It's like you're the sneakers of keyboards. That's so
well, it was
slick.
just, and again, at right place, right time. And these days, it's like they put out a public beta release or something, and 10,000 people will test it. But a lot of these, like some of these keyboards, I was the only guy outside the company testing.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, and
that's like pioneer type stuff. In a regional sense, it is.
It was, and it was for that one industry or that one product or that one whatever. And I have, in fact, one of the keyboards I have is the only one that has a particular version of software in it because their computer crashed and they didn't have a viable backup. And the only backup, which isn't a backup, is the programmed chip that's in my keyboard.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And they had to completely rewrite the software from the very beginning.
They didn't offer you anything for it?
They couldn't reverse engineer it even.
Oh,
it's like it was they knew how to do it, but they just had to redo it.
Yeah.
Right.
But it literally is
That's
awesome. I actually wrote an editor so you could see the parameters of the keyboard on the screen and pick sounds and decide what was going to layer and what zones they were going to be in and all this and that. And I wrote software for that chip.
Damn.
I've got the only one that works for it because all the other commercial ones used a different setup and my program doesn't work with it.
That's wild.
That's fucking crazy.
But yeah, you've been doing programming for Mac too.
I did some Mac programming. I started teaching myself Mac programming because both the company I worked for, Southworth, which was one of the first software company I tested for, and Digital Performer or Performer and Digital Performer and this other company, they all used the same programming language called Lightspeed C. And I thought, well, if I'm going to learn programming, I'm going to learn what the guys in the music business use, the guys who I've already know.
Right.
And I started learning. I started teaching myself with I got a Kernigan and Ritchie C programming book. If anybody's ever taught computer stuff, this is what should go. It's the book, and it's what all C programming is based on. Is this 150-page book? And I just started.
I'm pretty sure I have that book.
Yeah, with a big blue C on the cover and the right there.
But I'm not.
Well, it was.
I've tried.
To me, it was mostly logic puzzles. Yeah. It was, how do you get this to do that or branch and do something else? And then I remember I called Kurzweil up at one time, and somebody had asked me if they could. Oh, this was a later keyboard though. Since Ray Kurzweil had invented the reading machine, these people were text-based in their infancy. Even though the music system their music companies, it's separate from that. So the Kurzweil Intelligence or whatever it's called. And look him up. He's a phenomenal character. Amazingly, brilliant lunacy kind of thing.
I love
but it. But I said I was writing I decided to start a newsletter about this particular keyboard that was coming out, and I was the only tester outside of the factory that had one. They had been promising me one for 5 months. You're going to get one of the test units. You're going to get one of the test units. And every month I'm blocking off time to do it. And then it's not available. It's like, oh, we didn't get them back from the factory. We didn't get them in yet. It's going to be another month. And it just kept going on and on. And at one point I called him and said, look, I don't want to sound, ungrateful. I said, but you're promising me I can be part of this. And I really, really want to be part of it. But if you're just stringing me along, like, tell me. Like, right. I don't want to, waste my, because I'm blocking out time to do this and then having to.
You're emotionally invested as well.
And he goes, no, I really want you to test it because this is the one that replaced the keyboard that I originally got. Mm-hmm. And he goes, but we're not sure how many we thought we were going to get 5. And we'd keep one here and we'd have 4 testers. And he goes, but we're not sure we're going to get 5. It turns out we may only get 2. And Wendy Carlos is one of the testers. I don't know if anybody knows the name, but Wendy or Walter Carlos, sex change in the 60s, did one of the first million-selling classical records, which was all electronic, called Switched on Bach. That's the programmer. I mean, amazing piece of electronic work in 1967 or 68. But so she's got to get the verse 1, and we have to keep one here. But if I get another one, you'll get it.
Yep.
And then I find out Wendy's too busy to take the keyboard. You're going to get hers.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, not only, so I was the only one that had one outside the company.
That's awesome.
And I could do things with it as early tester and this and that and the hardware I had and the stuff I knew. There was no way to sample into the keyboard, but unless you had a computer that already did sampling with something else and this and that, and you had to know how to. And again, I'd done the programming side of it, so I could literally dump stuff in over MIDI into it and save it to a hard drive and all these things that again, they weren't going to have a part ready to do this for a year. They told me. So I decided right before the keyboard came out, because about 2 months ahead of time, I put a little classified ad in the back of Electronic Musician magazine that said Kurzweil Owners Group or Kurzweil User Group, with the new K2000, month, or I probably said monthly newsletter, or quarterly newsletter or something. Send self-addressed stamped envelope or something to me. Or I wasn't asking for money. Put a phone number and address, and I started getting all these people, or maybe an email address even at that point. It would have been 91 or 2. So probably enough people had email that might have mattered. But anyway, I got a couple hundred people involved, and I started doing this 8-page newsletter on how to use this thing. And just sending it out, printing up 1,000 of them, mailing them out. And then I started getting people calling and wanting to buy stuff and doing it. It was like, so I started trading samples with people, and I had a sample library that, like, if you could send me 5 discs that you made of sounds, I don't care what they are. They're drum machines. They could be synthesizers, could be barking dogs, whatever. You send me 5 discs, I'll send you any 5 from the library. There's a list in the library, a page. You can pick the 5 you want. I'll send them, and then I'll add yours to the list, and other people, we can trade with each other and do this.
Amazing.
So it was a network of sounds.
But it was all physical. I was mailing these, to people. And I said, and if you can't, then it's $2 a disc. And then I started getting order for 20 and 30 and 40 discs. And it was like, okay, I guess I'm duplicating floppy disks all day long.
Nice. Are you playing in bands at this time?
Yeah, I never stopped playing.
You
in
never
bands.
stopped playing. So you're
off the Spring Wind and Off the Walls. I started approximately 75 and ended in 95. We played our last gig.
Okay.
In that meantime, I had joined Lucifer up in Carroll County.
That's a great name.
Except when we played the Catholic schools, they changed the name. Every time we played a Catholic school, they changed the name.
It's probably a good call.
To what?
It varied. Like I think the bass player would pick something else, and it would just be that.
It'll be
tonight
Angel.
Tonight is going to be One Step Beyond, or whatever the band's going to be. And but then I left them to play with the Heat and the Cold Sweat Horns, and then I worked on a cruise ship in the Inner Harbor, all in the same time period. It's like because you got to work.
Right.
And then we'd started the studio downtown in Flipside down in Hamden, that ran from about 85 to 95, where we're doing commercial production work, and we're doing commercials for banks, and we did the Orioles promotional commercials for like 4 years.
God damn. Wait, so while you're doing the music...
Go Orioles. No, go.
Right, go O's.
Yeah, go O's.
While you're doing the music, like the MIDI stuff, all your computer programming, just research, you're just figuring out how to do all this brilliant shit. You're doing a band, working, holding seminars...
Raising kids.
Raising children. Of course, your wife, God love her.
I quit the music store in 89. I was going out for surgery. Again, years of hauling a B3 around. I got a hernia, had to be taken care of. But It's actually a birth defect. But it finally got to the point where it needed to be addressed.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't going back to work. Mm-hmm. And one of these companies that I tested for, the software company, the Southworth, I did what I don't know if anybody else does this. I was leaving a business I'd been in for about 3 or 4 years. And I had really good relationships with these people at all these companies that I thought, because I was the ordering guy and I was the repair guy. I was the guy who sent stuff back for warranty stuff. And so I knew these people in the shipping department and the programming, in the tech department or whatever. So I was calling up these half a dozen companies that I worked with regularly, literally to say goodbye. Like, hi, this is Paul there. Yeah, I just want to let you know I'm leaving my job at the music store, and it's just been great working with it, but I don't think I'm going to be doing this ever again. And I'm not moving to another music store. I'm just kidding. But it's just been great work with you, and so. And I started doing this to different companies. And the one guy up in Massachusetts at Southworth, he goes, "Well, I'm leaving my job too." I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" He goes, "I'm going to work for the people who make the hardware for us, these guys. They make MIDI interfaces, and to this day, they still make MIDI interfaces, and they make some of the best audio hardware ever." Mm-hmm. But this was like beginner electronic stuff for digital audio and MIDI. Right. And I said, "Well, really?" And I said, "Well, who's going to do your job?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know. You want it?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You know the software as well as anybody else. I'll just have them send the phone calls to your house, and you can answer the tech questions." Really? And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, and I was making, I think, $6 an hour working in the music store. And he said, "Well, they'll pay you." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll talk to Bill, the owner, Bill Southworth. So I'll talk to Bill about it. It's $9 an hour." And so instead of driving to Catonsville from Westminster every day, I sat at home and answered the phone in my pajamas and with my 3 kids did tech support calls.
Remote job.
It was great.
Right, you were leading the charge for remote work.
It was bizarre.
90s.
It was great. And then again, playing in bands on weekends and doing the studio late at night and once my wife got home and it just happened again, right. A lot of it's right place, right time, and saying yes to the right guy.
Right.
And eventually, this company I was doing the phone support for, not too long after, went out of business. But everybody still had my phone number, so I'm still fielding support calls, just not getting paid for it anymore. But the company doesn't have an upgrade path. There is no upgrade path, right? Because they're out of business. And when I had left the music store, he stopped carrying all this software and stuff that I had worked with these companies. And I'd tell people, "Well, you can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. You want to do that? You probably need to move to this software or whatever." And they go, "Well, can I get it from you?" And I went, "Well," and I go, "Well, call the other store." And he goes, "Well, he doesn't carry it anymore." And so I started calling these same people back and going, "Hey, you know me. I've worked for the store for years, and I've just got my old customers all want to buy this stuff, and I'd be happy to sell it to them, but I'm not a dealer." And so I was the first dealer in Maryland to carry Pro Tools, to carry Avid software, Digidesign software at the music store, but he wasn't doing it anymore. So I called him up and said, "Do you mind if I sell this stuff out of my house?" And I'm still selling it out of my house.
Wow, dude.
I think I'm the only guy in the country who has a bookshelf with software on it, and that's my store. But so I had this sort of built-in tech support clientele, even though I wasn't getting paid for that, who needed repairs on their interfaces, or they needed something to replace it, or they needed something. They got a new computer and the new operating system doesn't work with the old software. So I was the guy that was, I can sell you Performer. I can sell you, at the time it wasn't even Pro Tools. It was Sound Designer and whatever the other thing was at the time. And so I had a built-in bunch of musicians who were all tech heads, who all used Macs, who all needed software. It's like I was the perfect conduit for that.
Right.
And I dealt with people all over the world. In fact, my mom would babysit on rare occasions, and I'd say, "Whoever it is, make sure you take their number because it's probably a client." And she'd come home, "You got a call from South Africa and from Australia and from Sweden." I go, "Yeah, I know. Those are my customers. Let me." And of course, that's why my long distance bill was how big as it was.
Worldwide.
Because I was the guy. I was the one guy left because he closed the other store. I mean, the business had closed down. But I don't know it at the time, but I'm dealing with Universal Theme Park and Lucas, Skywalker Ranch.
You're the Silicon Valley of the East Coast.
They're the ones calling me for tech support, and I'm the guy going, "Go to this bar, man. You pull this down, pull that up. You see a button there that says that. Click that button. Does that fix your problem? Great, thank you. Goodbye."
That's incredible.
Wow.
And then that just led to other things. It just because then I made contacts with people that all over the country if you haven't noticed, I don't have any trouble talking. Right. So even a 5-minute tech conversation became a 30-minute tech conversation where I ended up asking the guy what he did and what we're doing.
Right.
And apparently that worked both ways, where every once in a while somebody would remember that about me.
Sure.
And then when the company finally got out of business, even the tech calls, it kind of dropped off to nothing. Because again, everybody had to move on. Because at the time, computers pretty much about 3 years into it, you were out of date.
Right.
These days, not necessarily. I mean, if you want to run the old software is one thing, but if you want these days, 5-10 years depends on the operating system. You can easily keep a computer going that long and still be current. Yeah. I'm doing all my live show stuff with a 2012 MacBook Pro. I can still do 32-track audio recording with a 13-year-old computer or 12. So, but at the time when you switch a new computer, a new system, it's like old stuff didn't work. It had to be updated, and the software wasn't updatable. So again, I would get calls from people to move on, and I had this one call from a guy. Company had been out of business already for 3 or 4 years, and a guy I dealt with up in Boston or up in the Massachusetts area, Red Barn Studios or Red Gate Studio something, and I don't know. I recognize his voice just because of the accent, and I probably talked to him 3 times ever. And I remember going, Andy Topeka, is that you? Is Andy? Yeah, it's me. Great. Is this Glenn? Yeah. How are you doing? Haven't heard from you in a while. You're great. We're coming, the band's coming to, and I don't have no idea what you're talking about. The band's coming to DC for some rehearsals before the tour. And I remember you worked with Kurzweil stuff and that you live nearby. Would you be available to do some programming? I went, sure. Where are you rehearsing? RFK Stadium. And I'm not kidding. It was like, I literally had seen the Stones the night before in Toronto playing a dive bar where people walked in for $5 and didn't know it was going to be the Stones on stage.
Wow.
And his thing is, we're in Toronto, we're coming to DC. And it's like, hold on. RFK Stadium, there were 4 concerts that year. You can look this up. I looked it up actually about a year ago to make sure I wasn't still remembering this wrong. There were 4 concerts that summer at the stadium. It was Pink Floyd, Elton John, Billy Joel, the Grateful Dead, and the Rolling Stones. And the other 3 had happened. It was like, he's asked me to work for the Rolling Stones. Because I answered a text, because I met this guy at a trade show, started selling his software, took his job when he left, and I answered the phone and was nice to this guy for 3 or 4 times.
That's awesome.
And I'm working for the Rolling Stones.
That's what the fuck we're talking about.
And it was just, it was like, and I call them fairy godmother gigs because that's what they are.
It's the rhythms of the universe. You put time into
And somebody says,
rhythms.
well, how do you go to work for something like, well, okay, go do the things I did, which are impossible to do. And,
Right.
And I give credit to this anytime I'm asked or not asked. There was a studio in Baltimore where the Little Feat used to record and many people used to record up in Hunt Valley. And it had moved to a barge down they called it Blue Seas, when it was downtown on a barge on the harbor, pretty much where the Science Center is now, where the recording studio on a barge on the water.
That's fucking incredible. How come nobody?
It sank.
Okay.
Literally.
My recollection, if you look it up, is, and I toured the studio at one point and got to play the piano that, the Steinway that Billy Payne had recorded, Feats Don't Fail Me Now on. It's like, oh my God, this sounds so good.
Right.
But apparently at some point at the end of a session, they had to turn the bilge pump off while they were recording so you wouldn't get the noise.
That's awesome.
And apparently somebody didn't turn it back on, and the thing filled up and sank.
Wow.
The whole studio into the harbor. But anyway, one of the owners was Steve Boone, or was there. I don't know if he was engineer or owner or a little bit of both, but he was the bass player in a group called the Love and Spoonful in the 60s.
Yes.
And now lives in Florida. And we very rarely keep in touch on something on Facebook. He wouldn't know me, other than a quick message back and forth. Mm-hmm. But I am, of course, asking him as a young, 18-year-old, first time in the studio or second time in the studio kind of thing, going, who do you do what to, and how do you get to be a real musician or whatever?
Right.
And his comment to me, and I'm sure it's paraphrased, there have been morphed over years, but it was essentially, you have to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And if you're not in enough places often enough.
That's a great
and
quote.
That's really the kicker for me.
That really is a great quote.
So if you're not, you can be the best at anything in your basement, and who the hell's going to know?
Yep, no one will give a shit.
And all you got to do is be noticed, whether you're the best or not. You be good enough.
Mm-hmm. And consistent.
And right. Well, I've never missed a gig in my life. Not ever have I ever missed a gig in my life. And I've only ever missed a set.
I saw that. I read that.
It's true.
So back to the Stones.
So
not that it's just because I don't want to tangent too much.
Do you have show notes that you put along with your podcast?
It's right here, man.
Well, just so you know, I wrote this up about 10 years ago, and this summer will be the 30-year anniversary of it. I wrote it up because I was telling the story all the time.
Right.
And I thought, I got to write this down before either I forget it or I start changing it too much.
We can add show notes.
Sure. Okay, well, I'll put a link to it. I actually put it up. I wrote it up one day and said, my life with the Rolling Stones 20 years ago or something.
Absolutely.
And it's this 5-page thing. Mm-hmm. But it was great. It was ridiculous.
I mean, that's fucking great. So just to be clear, did you actually meet the Stones or you just worked for the entity of the Rolling Stones?
This DC, the shows in DC were going to be the first shows of the tour. So it was opening night of the tour. They were coming in for a week ahead of time to do shakedown on the whole new stage and lighting and pyrotechnics rig and everything else. And my understanding at the time was they were going to have 3 simultaneously available stage setups. One on the East Coast, one on the Midwest, or one in the middle of the country, and one on the West Coast. And while they're playing one of them, another one's being set up somewhere else, and the other one's driving to the next location.
Right.
So there's always a stage being built or always being torn down, or they're always standing on one. And they could just go bop with a plane and from place to place to place, but 3 identical stage setups. Right. So they were basically doing shakedown on this brand new stage contraption that he had built and whatever. And I was hired for the week before the show for their shakedown thing. And every day they came out on stage and played for an hour.
Holy shit.
And it's like, I had to stop working. These guys I couldn't get my work done because these guys wouldn't get off the stage and stop playing. so I would just
shut up, Dan.
So I would just stand back there by the amps or next to Charlie Watts or something and just watch them play. And then they would leave, and then I'd go back to sit down and start pushing buttons where I was supposed to push buttons. It was again, I wrote this all down, so I really don't want to go in the whole thing again. But it was just ridiculous.
That's surreal, dude.
And I worked for him for about, again, that week. And a lot of things that didn't happen, but it's the last day, like the show's the next day. And I went to Andy and said, I really appreciate the opportunity and and thanks. And that was just incredible. And he goes, well, aren't you coming to the shows tomorrow? Tomorrow? It was like Monday and Wednesday or something. It was a day in between. I said, well, I don't know. Am I coming to the shows? I was working here. I wasn't a ticket holder. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'll put passes. I'll give you passes for the show. And it's like, so then I got to go to both shows, too, and see what was going on. And I had all access passes. I could be anywhere, anytime, except on stage during the show.
I mean, at Rolling Stone show.
What year was that?
94. Nice. It was August 1st and 3rd, 94.
94. Oh,
we saw Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead at our
we were at 2 of those shows that summer. There you go. We were at the Dead and we were at Pink Floyd.
Yeah. And they were both in July.
Yeah.
No shit.
That's awesome. That's a cool.
But yeah, it was beyond. And even when he went to pay me,
I mean,
he goes, so how much? Money hadn't even come up.
Bro, you said, what is it, $100?
Yeah. Money had not even come up. And he goes, well, so what do we owe you? And I went, honestly, everybody I talked to said I should charge you triple because you're the Rolling Stones or whatever, know. Right. And I said, but honestly, I'd have done this for nothing.
Sure.
I said, it was just too cool. He goes, oh, I know anybody would. What do you want to get paid? And so I charged him my regular day rate like I did for anybody else. It's like, it was such a, just literally once in a lifetime.
Yeah, good for you. And if he respects you, he'll respect that.
He would recall me. Yeah. He got a couple calls during the tour for, we need to change this, or can you tell me what to push on? Because basically again, when I walked on stage, I literally said, what do you want? I didn't know what you wanted to do. Keyboard program. What's that mean?
Right.
They had a rack of synthesizers and a Hammond organ and a Yamaha piano controller. And he says, well, I want to, he puts this one button. We want all these to flip to the right sounds and be available in the right places on the keyboards where he needs them where Chuck Leavell was the keyboard player. And we also had to set up a little rig for Mick Jagger, who played something like Angie or something else on the piano at the different shows at the front. They put a piano down front and he would play that song or whatever song it was.
Wild Horses.
Right, something like that. And there was the horn section they had with them. They actually had 4-piece horns, I think. And that guy also played some auxiliary, string parts or horn parts or keyboard parts, whatever. So I had these the big keyboard rig and these 2 little ones I sort of was setting up. But I said, so what do you want me to do? He said, we're trying to do this or this or this. And I literally walked over to the buttons and went ding, 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 and hit okay. I said, you mean like that? And he goes, we should have hired you 6 months ago.
Yeah, wow.
He goes, we should have hired you 6 months ago in Toronto. And my next words were, And when you're playing Europe, let me know. I've never been. I'll go with you.
Perfect.
And every single one of the keyboards, and this is I wrote this up in my little thing too, but every single one of the keyboards, if you've ever seen a modern keyboard, it has a program name, grand piano, strings, whatever it says. You go to the bottom of the list, it'll say, need help? Call Glenn, 94109.
That's hilarious.
And so he called me a couple times on the tour when they wanted to change something. I said, you have no excuse not to have my phone number. It's in every piece of these equipment.
That's fucking awesome.
That's
I mean, what rare air, you know? Like, that's rarefied air, baby.
It was, again, just incredible stuff. So, but I've been lucky 3 or 4 times like that with things that you just come out of the blue and you go,
so Glenn,
how did I be here? If this guy from Reisterstown, how does he end up doing that? You know?
So let's go to Crack the Sky. Okay, you were a keyboard player for Crack the Sky.
From 98 till yesterday.
Till 98, is that right? Yesterday?
Yesterday was the first gig they played without me since I joined the band.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's wild because you just said, you're like, I don't think he's in the band. But I don't think you were talking about yesterday.
Yeah, well, no, yesterday, Steven, I play in an 80s cover band.
I saw you.
Yeah.
Holy shit, we shared it.
Wait a minute, we just came full circle.
This fucking guy's hanging with the Stones and shit. Like, I forget that.
We're hanging out.
Well, you know, like, I forget that.
What's Mick doing right now?
You know, right. I said, call up Keith, tell him about Sanity Lounge. No, I'm like, right. But, you know, I forget that we've shared bills, but, you know, humbly, I play
when your name first came across on whatever email or text you sent me, it was like, wait a minute, I just heard that name recently. It was like, which, you know,
right.
And you also spell Brian with a Y, right? Because so is Brian Ewald. So see, a lot of time, my first thought was, why is Brian asking me about a podcast?
That's
so it was wrong Brian. So
well, I'm just happy to know you. But wait, so the point of my riff was
Crack the Sky,
right? So, well, the Crack the Sky thing, 98 is probably too late. I was gonna say we saw Crack the Sky at Merriweather in 90.
It was the mid 90s. It was
mid 90s, 96.
Yeah, I didn't ever play Merriweather with them.
They blew my face off. That was one of those shows that, because I'm a Steely Dan fan, when I discovered Crack the Sky, I was like, holy shit. Like, this is kind of that flavor. It's just a little bit.
It's funny, a review of their first album mentions Steely Dan and 10cc and somebody else.
Is that right?
Yeah, it does. The Rolling Stone review of their first album says that.
Well,
it says, like the band's blah, blah, blah. You know,
I think
Steely Dan
Zappa was on that list too. Yeah.
Right.
That's
and not that they sound anything like any of them.
They
to me,
don't.
It's like, but in terms of the creativity side of things and the quirkiness and the unusual, you know, the lyric content and whatever.
Right. The highbrow lyrics, the progressions are not what you think or go different places.
And how many original members are in that band right now?
4.
4?
Yeah. It was 3 until I left.
Nice.
Both Dave DeMarco and I. I've been in the band 26 years. He's been in the band 13 years, and we both, after the last show, we played together. So the original bass player came back, Joe Macri. So.
Yeah. Now, is that all good over there? Is it you know?
I hope so.
Okay,
I hope they're doing well. I mean, it's a long stretch to be in one band.
That's a hell of a run.
It was a good band. I mean, I'm on, I counted the other day, I think I'm on 10 albums.
I know.
With them. So it's like the band doesn't stop.
I know. So, and you're mentioned in the Rolling Stone magazine. That's fucking nice.
Well, I wasn't in the band in 76 or 75.
That was an article from 2018.
Yeah, it was an article from
when we had an prog rock band you've never heard of.
Right, and then their first album got picked as one of the 50 best prog rock albums of all times.
Yeah,
that's fun. And then bands you may have missed, kind of thing. All within the past 5 years or 5 or 6 years.
I love that
She's a Dancer's on the original album.
Yeah, that is.
I love that they've kind of, not that anybody from this area, but I feel like they will, they're getting a better due nowadays even than what they used to get.
It can be. A lot of their early problems had to do more with record company screw-ups and, things. Or not, whether it's management or whatever. I mean, and I don't make sure I get this wrong. If you look at the credits for Spinal Tap,
right,
one of the thank yous near the end is it's isolated little thank you says thanks to Derek Sutton. Derek Sutton was their tour manager in the first tour. He was also King Crimson's tour manager, among other things.
Holy shit!
And you go, every band in the world says if they're watching Spinal Tap goes, that happened to me, that happened to me, that happened to me. That's my story. they very well may have gotten some of this shit from Crack the Sky things.
There's
incredible. No proof of any of that. But when I saw that the first time, I thought, that's just ridiculous.
That's incredible.
Because he probably, and Ricky Tez, they played military bases that they played or getting lost under the stage. He says absolutely happened to them.
Wow.
So, you know, where they couldn't find the way to get on stage.
Right.
Just like so. So whether that, you know, I don't say apocryphal, you know, we'd like to think it's them.
Yeah, but that's a great, I mean, it very well could be, especially
But there's so many rock stories like that where this happened to my band or that, you know, whatever.
Right.
So, and it was such a brilliant movie.
It's an incredible movie. Actually, on a quick side tangent, did you see they're doing part 2?
Oh, I know.
And the clip that they fucking released of Christopher Guest talking about jazz.
Yeah.
He's going, jazz is based on fear. It's like they're afraid.
Maybe I did see that clip.
I mean, it's fucking brilliant.
What I love, I have the DVD of the thing, and my favorite part about it is that it literally is 3 times more than the movie. You have the movie, all as it was. You can watch it with commentary,
the commentary,
which is all of them in character commenting on the movie 20 years later and dumping on what they needed, you know, their manager, their producer, whatever. And then you can watch 2 hours worth of outtakes.
Right.
Which is itself, it's just as good as the movie.
Incredible.
But you've got much more of the ancillary characters, the Bruno Kirby and the Dana Carvey and Bill and Fran Drescher and Paul Schaefer and all those people. Like, they just riffed and riffed and riffed, and I don't know how they cut it down to 90 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, it was the perfect mockumentary. It was the dawn of the mockumentary.
As you say,
you know, I mean, it was so fucking good. I love that. Well, that's good stuff. And you know, so the Crack the Sky run we had to mention because it's a hell of a
it's a big thing. I had
and,
a wonderful time. There's some of the greatest. Even when I had a week to learn the stuff when I joined the band.
Did you just walk into that, or how did that happen?
I was told, I had a week before the first show, and they had played about a month before, and there was a recording of them playing it, at the CVS. It's now a CVS, but it was AL Gators or Network or, you know, when they played the CVS. And so I had that recording from a month or so ago to listen to, and then we practiced a couple with some of the guys live local and a couple of guys live out of town. One in West Virginia, one up in New Jersey. So the local guys would practice, and and then the guys would come in for the show, and we usually have one afternoon rehearsal with them and then go play. But I remember just putting the tape on and going, and I hadn't had my record player turned on in 10 years. And I didn't have the stuff on tape.
Well, how did you get the gig? Like, did they?
I knew the drummer at the time, John Tracy, and Bobby Hurd had both been in the band Climbing Donkey, and then later the Ravens. And they left the Ravens to play with Crack the Sky in 80, 81, whatever it was. And Kerry Ziegler had just started up his band, The Expensive Hobby, and I was playing with him. So it's like Kerry recommended me to them, I guess, or we know him, and So we practiced 2 or 3 times with that, and but I remember putting the song, because I had never bought the albums on CD. In fact, that time they may not have been on CD yet.
Right.
But even if they had been, it's like I hadn't had my record player up in 10 years, and I remember just putting on the first song and going, God, I forgot what a great song that is.
Right.
Whatever it was, like it was Hold On, and then the next song comes on, it's Surf City, and I go, God, what a great song that is. And then Nuclear Apathy, and you go, what a great song that is. It's like, and I'm just listening to this tape going, why have I not, what?
Right.
And of course the people in Baltimore, in the Maryland area, people who grew up here listening to them on the radio in the 70s and in the 80s, honestly think they're as big as AC/DC or
absolutely.
Led Zeppelin.
That's why I said, unless you've been living under a rock, everyone knows.
But around here,
Sky.
and when you go and you mention to somebody else out of town, and they go, what do you mean you don't know who these people are? They were locally as big as you could possibly be.
I know. I had no idea.
I feel like She's a Dancer and Hot Razors were on like Freedom Rock.
Well, they might have been. I don't think they were. But
John had already left the band after the second album, but he'd written a bunch of the songs for the third record, or co-written them in this, and then they recorded with a different singer, and then they toured on that. That's if you see the credits for the band, and this is all spelled out somewhere on Wikipedia and elsewhere that would know more than me, but. There's almost, I dare you to name a band they weren't the opening act for at some point or another in the late 70s. I mean, It's everybody.
Yeah, they were heavy hitters.
It's Frank Zappa. It's Rush. It's it's the Styx. It's Kansas.
Yes,
it's
Boston.
Yes, right. Yeah. Everybody. I mean, just Foghat, whatever. Name it. If they were an album-oriented rock band, Crack the Sky, one way or another, played with them.
I mean, you said you were on 10 albums. How many albums do they have?
About 20. Oh, it's exactly 20.
Exactly
of
20?
Of studio albums.
Studio albums.
Yeah, there's a couple live ones too, but the studio albums, there's 20 of them.
And how many times? I mean, how often do they still play out?
About a dozen, 12 to 15 times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are all those studio albums like local cut, or are they?
No, well, again, the original ones are still owned by the original record company, Life Song Records, which the band used to refer to as Lifelong Records because of their contract.
Right.
It's a joke I heard from one of the guys in the band. But then there was the local studio, Sheffield, where I teach, was their record company for a while, put out 2 records with them called Criminal Records, put out an album called World in Motion and The End. And then later a company called Grudge Records put out 2 albums, one called From the Greenhouse and Dog City. And then everything after that was all independent.
It's so funny because I had no idea that they weren't world
Oh, no.
like I just when we went to Florida,
like people that know them and I swear, you wear a Crack the Sky T-shirt, I don't care where you are, somebody will come up to you, and go, "You know that band?"
Yeah.
There's always one.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome.
Right.
Well, that's another just like rarefied air, awesome cap on your resume.
It was a great. I mean, it was just too much fun and just such great music. And
right.
Also, I went immediately after the very first gig to get custom earplugs made.
Good for you.
Yeah,
I'll bet.
Oh my God! At the time, it's different now. They're older, deafer.
Right. But they didn't.
Oh my God!
The stage, the noise stage,
the Marshall stacks on either side, and but boy, it was just fun.
Yeah, I'll bet. So now Technicolor Motor Home. So you're rocking, you're doing MIDI, you're rocking for great people like the Stones. Carole King, that was another thing.
That was I got hired to do. She got just recently. Elton John got the Gershwin Songwriter Award. I don't know if you saw any of that. Just within the past 4 or 5 months, there's that she had won the Gershwin and I probably got some of this wrong, but it was like I think the people who have been honored so far with this as songwriters,
right?
Stevie Wonder, Paul McCartney, Paul Simon, Carole King,
wow,
Elton John. Okay,
right,
yeah.
They're okay.
Right,
they're all right.
But they were doing a concert at the Library of Congress for her with a congressional invite only. And I got hired to record the show.
Nice.
And the next night they did it at the White House, with actually different people. We had Colby Calais and Arturo Sandoval, one of the girls who wrote Man in the Mirror, co-wrote with Michael Jackson, all these other people playing and singing Carole King songs for Carole King. The drummer from the Saturday Night Live band, I don't remember his name. The guy with the hat. No, not Anton Fig, the guy with the hat on Saturday Night Live, not on, I can't think of his name. But anyway, he's there. But it's a bunch of heavy hitters, but they were all doing. I went down the day before to do setup and recording testing and whatever, and then recorded the show.
That's incredible.
And delivered the multi-track to the Library of Congress.
I mean,
and again, that was actually somebody who contacted Drew Mazurek, a local engineer, again who I worked with on and off for. We both teach out at Sheffield and Towson, and he teaches at Peabody these days too, and has for 10 years I think. Mm-hmm. But Drew, somebody called him about doing it, and he didn't either want to or knew about I had for hardware and could do it, and so he basically just passed it off to me. And
that's awesome.
So yeah, it was great. It's there.
Serendipity.
You just need the little magic wand to do that.
Well, that's the thing. It's like paying attention to rhythms and people and just communicating and keeping your eyes peeled.
Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
It's not. Life is not that hard, and people make it way more difficult than it needs to be. I've been so lucky to play with some really fantastic people, even from the first band on. Everybody in the heat. Everybody, I worked on a cruise ship in the harbor for 4 years. It's just some phenomenal people doing dinner cruises. Getting on 6:30, playing jazz, sitting down up top of the boat, watching the bay go by, and then going in and playing an hour of dance music and some singing waiters and waitresses. I've
read somewhere. Do you still play piano in Little Italy?
Yeah, I do. With the the restaurant group, the Atlas group, which continues to expand beyond all comprehension. Phenomenal places. They really have, but one of the first things that they started with was the area called the Quarter, right in Little Italy. So it's the Italian disco, Monarch, Elk Room, and Tagliata.
Okay.
And I play the solo piano with the Tagliata usually.
Like regularly?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Today's on Monday, the June 16th, which I don't know when this goes, wherever it goes.
It'll be
It'll be a
It'll be
minute.
a
A
while,
couple
but
weeks.
But anyway,
fine,
I'm living tomorrow.
That's awesome.
So it'll be gone by the time this is out. But usually about 2 or 3 times a month. It just depends. For a while I was playing there every Tuesday, but I'm back to, and then occasionally at the Oregon Grill out in
in the Oregon Grill. That's awesome.
Chouan Valley, whatever. And the same. I've also played Chop Tank downtown. I played the Admiral's Cup before. Played Perennial.
Yep.
They own all these places or run all these places now. So
how many bands like right now do you play?
Well, when I played the Naptown Music Fest last month, there were 5 bands on the bill. I was in 3 of them.
Right.
Is that real?
Naptown, the Sweet Lita played that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sweet Lita opened, and then the Regal Beagles played next.
Yeah.
Yes, I was in that band, and then Ja Works played.
Nice.
And then the Sons of Pirates and the Big Buffett Beach Band, which is our 10-piece version of a mostly Buffett tribute thing with horns and Elena Martin from Real Geniuses and Jimmy Charleston and Tom Moon and a bunch of other people sort of added to the group. And then the Petticoat Junction Band. I was the original keyboard player in that band.
That's the Tom Petty one.
That's the Tom Petty one. And they and these days a guy named Andy Bruce is the keyboard player for them.
Real nice guy. I love Andy
and
Bruce.
But there had been, as the group got booked more and more often, I was less and less available for all the gigs. And for a while, they had 4 different keyboard players. There's Mike, Brian Sims, Elena Martin, and then Andrew basically took the chair, which is fine. But at that particular gig, when we booked it, it was like, hey, if we're going to book these other bands on it, I want to.
Yeah, right.
I don't have to move my gear. Can we just
trifecta?
Right? From the folks who brought you the Trifecta Food Festival. Yeah, it's the same people, Paul Mann and 24/7 Entertainment.
Oh, cool.
So they do. But anyway, but that's those 3 and the Sons of Pirates 4-piece band. They're very rare occasions. Some other things I haven't played in a while but the band hasn't played with Mink Stoll from the John Waters acting group in all his movies. She has a band called Mink Stoll and Her Wonderful Band. I'm a member of Her Wonderful Band.
Nice.
Wow.
So, but we put out one, I thought, really great record, really fun record.
That's awesome.
We ought to get them in the.
And then
we're trying to get John Waters in here to talk to.
We'll see. I'll talk to Mink, see what she has to say. Right. I'll talk to him. But yeah, just and they're bands that I fill in with on occasion, or I'm happy to play with if they'll let me.
Right.
Naked Blue, when they played Jen and Scott Smith, haven't done a gig with them in a good long while, but I just did some recording with their studio about two weeks ago, and so really just Eric Scott's group. I sub for people when they need somebody.
Right.
Glenn, how did the Sheffield thing come about, and when did you start teaching at Sheffield?
I started teaching there, technically 97 was when I was hired, and I showed up for the first class where I was told it was going to be. And I went into the room and I sat there for about 15 minutes and nobody showed up. And I walked upstairs and said, hey, what's going on? And they went, oh, we're not starting in November. We're going to start in January. So thanks for letting me know.
Wow.
So that was an auspicious start.
I didn't get the memo.
Right. I had been hired about 3 weeks before.
And
I was told it was going to be a November start, and it didn't start till the middle of January, and or whenever it was. And anyway, but that was 90, so it would have been 97. Yeah, so I was hired in the fall of 96. I started in January 97.
Okay, so in 97, I was recently sober and trying a different route at life, and I went to Sheffield.
You went before Full Sail?
It was the year before Full Sail. In fact, that was the whole thing, is that I was such a...
You went to an open house or something, or you went to the...
No, I went and graduated from Sheffield. I went for a year for video production.
Okay, so you didn't...
Video production.
Right, so you probably... Jimmy...
Joy.
Oh, Joy Schilling.
Do you remember Joy?
Oh, yeah, Joy and Renee. And
I love... That's my question to you is could I have known you? Is it possible?
I was in the building.
Joy...
The school started at the same time. The audio and video started at the same time. They had done... And again, the Sheffield over the years has managed to pivot to adjust to the industry quite remarkably. since it started as a home studio at the original owner in '68. Mm-hmm. They had the studio across from Timonium Fairgrounds in the early mid '70s, '75 to '7 or something like that, '78, and then they built the facility that they have now that's out on in Phoenix, up Delaney Valley Road or Warren Road. And that building has grown over the years, but the original building for there, I remember we had recorded at the one in the shopping center across from the fairgrounds. And at one point, the owner and the engineer, both John and Bill, took our band or whoever was there. We said, "We want to show you what we're doing," and they drove us out Warren Road to the plot of land, and there was grass 3 feet tall and survey stakes stuck in the ground, and they're going. And here's where the control room's going to be, and then there'll be a floating floor, and this is where the studio. And we're standing in this field of 3 foot high grass, going, "Yeah, sure." Like we have no idea.
Great.
Yeah, that's
no
awesome,
idea what they're talking about. And but then they built it, and we and I said we were either first or second band to ever record there. The group with Off the Wall was. We had a great session there, really did.
Yeah.
But it was sort of like kicking the tires at that point.
Wow!
Didn't you meet Biz Marquis there?
Yeah, that year. At some point,
probably.
I walked out,
R.I.P.
like maybe even to go to the bathroom. Yeah, R.I.P.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Biz Marquis walks in, and
that's
I'm like, "Is this
people,
Biz?" And he was recording there somewhere, not with us or anything, but
they
he was
did
there.
a lot of acts over the years. But they said they had gotten, as they jogged from sort of recording local bands to recording national acts to being sort of out a remote where at the time in the late 70s and early 80s, somebody would pay for a band to go be in a studio for a month.
Right.
And so they had, places nearby. They had a shower in the place and you could clean up and there was food everywhere. And that was kind of like the business. But then it switched to video recording and duplication. And they were doing recording classes on the weekends. And I don't remember, it was either 4 Saturdays or 6 Saturdays or something in a row where you came and learned how to record a band and mix a band and produce a final stereo product.
That's good shit.
And you got a little certificate from RIAA, the Recording Institute of America, whatever, that said you completed the recording course. But then they got too busy with video production and tape duplication and whatever else the industry had shifted to. And they were doing film productions for anything from, and again, I wasn't working there at the time. So, but there were things like, a corporate video they would do or a presentation video.
Right, I remember a lot of corporate videos.
A lot of stuff like that. And then Joy was doing a lot of that, editing a lot of that. Her and Rick Larimore. Rick was great.
Did you have him? Name. I remember that.
Ray was great. Yeah. Wonderful people. But in fact, Rick was just back again for a while, and then he's gone again. And then all of a sudden, sort of the recording business, there was not say falling apart, but some of the home studio stuff or the digital stuff was sort of taking over in a lot of cases. And they say, we've got this facility. Why don't we sort of start the recording thing back up? Only this time they went whole hog and got, stretched out a program for the Maryland Higher Education Committee, MHEC, which basically says you're a certificate granting. Not a degree, it's not a college degree, but it's a trade school.
Right.
Like if you got truck driving school or beautician school, you're going to audio engineering school or video engineering school. And you officially have completed the requirements that the state does for X numbers of hours of training to be, a beginner to intermediate entry-level position in this field. And so that's when Bill Miller had called me and asked me about, we're going to do this and this and this. And he literally listed off, software and companies that I worked for. It was like, well, I test for them, and I test for them, and I work for them, and I'm a dealer for them, and I program for them. I was an Apple developer for a bunch of years, too, just making stuff up. Sure. I made a bunch of stupid little programs.
You were made for this job.
That's literally what I went, because we hadn't recorded there. My band hadn't recorded there in about 10 years because we had opened a studio in Hamden, though I mentioned, the Flipside Sound. So I hadn't even been out there for 10 years. And he goes, I remember, I heard you were doing this and that, and would you be interested in teaching it? And the only pedigree I had as far as teaching it was doing these seminars that I'd done. So like everything else led up to being, I'm the guy for this thing.
Right. But even that, you developed your people skills, which is important for teaching because you got to be able to relate to people. You developed how to organize
you'd
your
have to
thoughts.
ask Chris, well, how good, did I do my job
this
or not?
cat, I know. And then years later, I'm like, well, look, I moved to Florida after Sheffield. I moved to Florida and with him. Yeah. And apparently, then Chris went to Sheffield.
And then the vortex of Baltimore.
Yes, 100%.
Right, and then the vortex of Baltimore sucked me back from the depths of Florida.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, well, that's good shit.
And then at Towson, you teach music business.
I teach music business course. It's an odd thing. Yeah. I mean, I really like it, But when I was, there was a course they haven't taught in over 5 years. And the trombone player I work with all the time, the horn guys I work with all the time, Barry Cowdell on sax, Dave McElwick on trumpet, and Jim McFalls on trombone. And Jim's been teaching at Towson for probably close to 20 years now. Mm-hmm. But he was ex-military. He'd been, he had full career retirement from the military and has worked as jazz historian and teaches. And he teaches the music business 1 class, which is like live performance related. And they hadn't taught this music business 2 class for like 5 years. And the guy had retired and moved on. And he mentions it to me, would you be interested? And I had to go, sit in an interview room and talk to the director of the music department, whatever, very nice guy, and the 2 other, Jim and another teacher there, and they're asking me questions about stuff, and, well, what have you done with the music business? And I went, well, I'm programming for them, and I work for this, and I worked in a music company, and I booked my own things, and I booked my own shows, and I worked for the Stones, and I worked for Stevie Wonder and Carole King, and I did, and I turned down the job with Earth, Wind & Fire, and I did, and I've run 2 record companies myself. I've done merchandise for them. I just went down the list of shit that,
right.
It's all music related, and it's music business, which most people don't realize is, the Jackson Browne song says it all when it breaks. Like the least time we get is the time to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
The rest of it's everything else, dealing with agents and travel and equipment and sound companies and logistics and
thinking
hotels
about problems that could
everything.
happen.
And how do we recover and equipment and repair and it's all. But so it's that's what have you done? That's what I've done.
Right.
I play solo. I play in duos and trios and big bands and little bands. And
the course is just kind of like how to navigate all that.
Well, the funny part about the course to me was there was a textbook, and the Jim McFalls teaches from the same textbook. So I went to him first and said, well, what chapters are you teaching from? Like, so I crossed those out, So
right.
Anything that was left was like, well, I guess that's what I'm teaching,
Right. You don't want to
and it's some little overlap with some of it because it's like you kind of need to know and apparently, even though I had thought there was like you had to pass music 1 to get to music 2. Apparently you can take them independently or take them simultaneously. I've had people do that too. And So I said, well, some of the stuff you have to know. If you haven't taken the first course, you have to know this. All the other stuff doesn't make sense. But I called the professor up. Jim gave me his contact info with the guy who had retired, and I said, what do you have for course materials? Because the only thing I had was a syllabus, and it said, read chapter X, which was, again, from some previous version of the same textbook, but they didn't match up anymore.
Right.
So read chapter X, class discussion. Day 2, read chapter X, class discussion. And I'm going, well, what about tests? What about reading material? What about, and a guy goes, I retired. I threw it all away. Like, I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. It's like, so I literally had to build this course from nothing.
Good for you.
So I started going, okay, well, we're going to talk about the sale of music, which is, first off, the creation of the phonograph, let's go that far back.
Right.
And then everything from, cylinders to platters to magnetic to, wire recorders to magnetic tape to lathing to vinyl to shellac to shellac to vinyl to CDs to cassettes or cassettes to 8 tracks to just all the way, like this is how music's been sold for 150 years. Here's the 12 or 15 different ways. It's starting with sheet music, and now we get into how do you sell physical music.
Right.
And then again, pick a topic: music for film, video, commercials, television. Okay, let's spend 2 days talking about that, and I'll show you examples, and we'll do whatever. And I just kind of built the course around all this stuff.
How long have you been doing that?
Now, I just did it for 6 years. Just finished my 6th season.
Is it a popular? I feel like that's got to be a popular course.
The course is supposed to, every time I look online, when I have to accept the contract from the state of Maryland for the particular term, because I'm an adjuncult professor. I'm not on staff.
That's what my wife does that for the University of Maryland for a clinical nurse.
It's the same thing. And they give her a contract and it says, you'll get this and we'll pay you that. But it says class size 15. I have never had a class that was 15. They've always been anywhere, except for the one pandemic year. I had, I think, exactly 15. They've all been 20, 21, 22.
Right. I feel like it's got to be.
Yeah. So, and then this past year, Jim got too busy to teach with other things he was doing to teach the Music 1 course. So this past spring, I taught the Music 1 course and the Music Business 2 course. And then about 3 years ago, I took over handling anyone who's doing an internship in the music industry. And I've got some couple great contacts with that who are accepting interns. And generally, it's the student's job to find the internship. And I just have to make sure they're submitting the right paperwork and they have somebody who's going to supervise them at the job, and the supervisor is willing to complete the paperwork.
Meet the parameters.
Right.
And
So that
shit, right.
for the degree or the credits for the thing and stuff. And then this spring I got one other guy who works there in the electronic stuff and the recording stuff says, hey, we got 2 courses coming up in the fall on the recording techniques, 1. And are you be available if you want to, can you cover them? And I was like, what days do they meet on? And it's like, okay, I can do that. I can make that fit in with my other.
That's awesome.
So I haven't been contracted for those yet. That'll depend on enrollment.
Right.
But if they get enough, get enough people, they'll be one of them. And if they get more than enough people, they'll be both of them.
Right.
And so one of them meets on Mondays and one of them meets on Wednesdays. And it's like, okay.
That's fucking awesome.
And so I'm a professor.
Professor. Like, that's what we ought to have the episode. We'll be like, tonight we're joined by Professor Glenn. That'd be incredible.
And it's just silly because I have no other than, like I mentioned, going to taking classes. 2 hours ago, we talked about me taking a theory class and piano classes at American University. That's the only university I've ever attended.
I know, but that's a testament to your grit.
Well, except every frat party and Rathskeller and outdoor thing at Hopkins and Goucher and Notre Dame and Madison and James Madison and Bucknell and Hood College. Oh yeah, we played every college for within 50, 100, 150 miles of here. Right. Blacksburg and UVA and whatever. I mean, just. That's what the bands do.
Yeah, right.
There was a time when the drinking age was still 18.
I just talked about that today.
There was every frat party, you have beer and band. How do you get people to pay $5 to get in? You put a band in the place.
Right,
and then and all the colleges had outdoor festivals and a Rathskeller at a beer garden or someplace where they did stuff. And that all of a sudden just dried up. 1984. It's like, bye.
Is that when it went to 21 again?
Yeah, 21. It was beer and wine for 18 and 21 for hard liquor.
Right.
And I can't remember the cutoff date in 84, but all of a sudden, all those places, they didn't like the frat parties didn't stop happening. They just couldn't be public anymore. Right. And they didn't hire a band.
Yeah.
Glenn, this is a little bit of a different question, but one we ask all the guests before we wrap up is, what film-wise, do you have a favorite movie? And if you do, can you narrow down a top 3?
It's tough. Because I tend to lead towards things that I find either more humorous than other things.
Yeah, we don't judge here.
Yeah, well, that's good. But and I listen to you all talk about movies which I haven't watched.
That's all right. Hey, we don't judge.
Which was fun. It was like, oh, okay, I can see the appeal.
Sure. He said the Muppets, huh? That's cute.
Well, he likes the Muppets.
It's hard to pick which Monty Python movie if you had to.
Right.
Or Time Bandits.
Terry Gilliam, Time Bandits.
And again, or hard pick a Terry Gilliam movie.
I agree.
Princess Bride.
One of the greats.
I mean, just literally, there's
phenomenal.
There are things where you go, and they're classic movies too, on the older era. But I missed most of the '80s. Like I was raising kids.
Right.
So
and learning everything.
Right. Well,
and getting loans for
getting lying to people,
hustling banks. Yes.
Yeah. So it's really hard because there's some movies that I will like my wife hates and I don't do it around her. I don't put on 2001 when she's around.
Dude, I love 2000.
But if you said what's your favorite action movie,
okay,
it would be probably, and again, it's hard pressed whether is it From Russia with Love, because it's the best spy James Bond movie, not just best James Bond movie, but the best one that's actually a spy movie, or Dirty Dozen.
Wow, look at you! I swear
that like the actual. I mean that.
Dirty Dozen to me is one of the to me, Dirty Dozen over Kelly's Heroes any day of the week. I love Kelly's Heroes, but Dirty Dozen, like everybody always references Kelly's Heroes, but I'm like, what about the Dirty Dozen? I've never even seen
Kelly's Heroes.
Well, that's dude. Dirty Dozen is phenomenal.
Put it this way, I think my son found Dirty Dozen in a bargain bin at a Best Buy or something. He bought it for me for my birthday one day.
It holds up. I mean, it's still a great movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's still to this day.
And some things
Kojak because of that movie.
I know his character.
It ruins it.
Posey.
Yeah.
Was that his name? No. Posey was the big dude. Yeah, Telly Savalas' character was something. He was a rapist.
Oh my God, but he like just screwed the
whole
operation.
But the whole is it Cassavetes and Bronson and Jim Brown and like
not Lee Majors.
Lee Marvin.
Lee Marvin. Yeah. Not the Bionic Man.
Right. Not to be confused with Lee Majors.
Right.
That's a little different. But,
and Donald Sutherland.
God, it was
just all. But again, ridiculous cast. Actually, a good plot, and it's kind of two movies.
Yeah.
There's like the training section.
Yep.
And then it's like the actual the mission.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's kind of the Stripes is the same way.
And there's the Uncommon Valor's like that too, or not Uncommon Valor. Yeah, Uncommon Valor.
Or Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
It's like there's the this part and then there's the that part. But again,
and even the From Russia with Love, Robert Shaw was the bad guy. Well, he wasn't the big bad. He was the hitman guy. But that was the first time I saw
you had,
Shaw.
The Clem and again, as a spy movie as opposed to a gadget movie.
Right? Yeah, you're right.
It was a spy movie.
Absolutely. Story wise, it was awesome.
And again, a lot of that, some of that may have been, what age was I when I was 8 or 10 years when I saw that, or 8 years old, and those were exciting movies to me.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's tough to beat.
Princess Bride, man.
Yeah,
that's a good pick.
Again, that borders on a perfect movie.
It really is.
There's not a line out of place. There's not one missed note. There's
the acting in it.
I've met 2 of the 3 of the Brute Squad. Can't meet Andre anymore, but I did.
You met Mandy
Patinkin. We played a wedding.
Oh my gosh!
With again the boys group I forgot to mention. Sorry, Boyster, another band I play with on occasion. We played a wedding in Baltimore where he was friends with one of the family members and stuff. And he is
awesome. Such a passionate man.
And Carrie Elways, I guess he's the other one you met?
No, the Wallace Shawn.
Our guy. Inconceivable. Our boy.
Yes, and when I met him, I did not say that.
Thank God.
I asked my friend, I was visiting a friend of mine who's an actor, and he had come, who was in this particular play I was going to see, and Wallace came back to talk to him in the dressing room afterwards. So I was there when he came back to say hi. And when he left, and I said 2 things. I said, just so you know, I didn't, I wouldn't do that to him because he must get that net.
He's got it. Yeah.
And then I said, the other thing is, does he realize how funny he is? Mm-hmm. I said, because he always looks so deadpan, so whatever. And he goes, oh yeah, he knows. I said, good. Yeah, because I don't want to be laughing at him.
Yeah, he's a great character actor. Perfect. Like whatever he's in, it's usually well cast, and he is perfect.
And it's tough to say with some of the, like I said, because we're not going to get too far off on the movie thing too, but because I know it's a lot of what you do, but some of the long form TV stuff of the past 20 years has been some of the best.
Astounding.
And because they didn't have to fit it into 2 hours or 90 minutes or whatever. And to me, something like Deadwood.
Oh my God.
I
was a fan of Deadwood.
Just, oh my God. And there's, again, everything about it.
Deadwood was my first tragedy watching because I had just gotten HBO. We had just moved back from Florida for whatever reason, and I had just gotten HBO, and I called it like whatever season it ended abruptly.
Oh yeah,
it got canceled.
It got canceled.
I called it I started that season. I watched the first episode of that season and was like, oh my God, I think I love this. I went back, watched all of them, then caught up with that season, watched it till the end.
Then we're done.
Right, and then
they
made
a movie.
They did, and the movie does wrap up some of it.
It was good.
It was good.
But I love.
But it was 20 years later.
I know.
I got my. Damn it! I can't
Justified, our boy.
Justified.
Well,
Timothy
Oliphant. I got the Timothy Oliphant
fix
after
Goggins
Deadwood was
from the same thing.
Oh God!
Again, there's people where that stick out to me right away.
Made.
Where you go, this is the first time I've ever seen this person.
Yeah,
I want to see everything he's ever done, or everything he does in the future.
And that's Walter Goggins. He's one of the greats.
And now he's Baby Billy.
Oh my gosh, dude! Righteous Gemstones.
Or was it? And again, is it? I'm going to forget her name. The girl who played Calamity Jane's, Robin.
I don't know her name, but I know who you're talking about.
She was so good as Calamity. Yeah. Just like again, and
no, wait, yeah.
And then I had just seen her on the show Tracker. She's on that show too, and I heard her voice. It was like, that's her.
It's not Ellen Barkin.
No.
He's doing the deep dive for the.
I can't leave it hanging.
Yeah, because.
Robin Weigert.
Yeah, that's her. That's her.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yesterday, her name could have spit out of my head, but not today for some reason. But
it happened.
And again, so these days, to me, some of the long form television is the equivalent of a really good movie.
Yeah, because it's funny. There's like there's a meme. It's like, do you want to watch this 8-hour movie? And you're like, absolutely not. They're like, how about we break it up into 1-hour segments and you just binge it? And you're like, absolutely,
right. Or the people that say, that they, what was it? The couple recent Martin Scorsese films. They're just too long. They're 3 hours long.
Right.
How is that too long when you will watch Friends for 14 hours?
Exactly.
So give me a break.
We do it right now. We watch Seinfeld for hours right now still.
Woe Davis and I went to see the Star Wars run
when they did
the Force Awakens. We did that.
Yeah, when Force Awakens. Yeah, we sat in the theater for 24 hours.
24 hours. Right. And we brought blankets and shit. It was wild.
I was talking to
a
friend just yesterday talking about how he had gone to the Senator to see when they played what is now 4, 5, and 6 in order, and to go see the Lord of the Rings, the extended versions, all in order at the Senator.
I would do all.
I would do that shit in a heartbeat, man.
And again, when you say pick a best is always hard.
It is. That's why I say like top 3 because I can't do it. It's hard to do, but they're good ones. I mean, Time Bandits. You're a Gilliam fan.
Oh yeah, and just stick with me, Kevin. You won't go far wrong. I mean, how do you beat how do you beat a line like that?
I know, man. Are you a Life of Brian guy
the canon? It's hard to separate the bunch from me.
I was always a Life of Brian guy just because of the name, even though it was spelled different. Yes. I worked.
You didn't say spelled wrong though. See, I like that.
Different.
Not that they're the same, but I'd leaned always more towards Mel Brooks movies than Monty Python movies. Not that they're the same.
I did too. Growing up, Mel Brooks was the one that I sought
like the history
out.
of the world.
My uncle would.
One of my daughter's favorites was Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah.
But how do you not see the current secretary, whose name is A. Blinken?
I know. I hear that. I know. I hear that every single time.
Every time they say it, I'm like, are they fucking with you?
I go, Abe Lincoln.
Right.
Hey, Blinken.
He didn't say Abe Lincoln. He said, hey, Blinken.
I think of that every time I hear it.
That was Chappelle.
That kills me.
That was Dave Chappelle was.
He was like, he's saying, hey, Blinken.
but that's all. But in the movie is when he says, hey, and Blinken goes, Abe Lincoln, and you go, who thought that?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Whose brain went that way? But anyway, yes, I can't. Is it Anthony Blinken? Is this?
I can't. But not hear.
But every comes it up, I just go, "Hey, Blinken." It's like,
Monty Python was always drier. Mel Brooks was American, and the movies were different flavor. The Monty Python troupe was just British comedy, and it's a different flavor. And some people don't.
Oh no. There's people. My family is, I won't say split, but there's those of us that do and those of us that don't.
Right. And I think that if you have history with it from a young age, it's different.
Mine
than
was
if you're coming to it.
When I mentioned doing these talent shows at Rosewood,
right?
One of the Jerry Gipe, I can't remember the other guy's name. They did the I'm Here for an Argument sketch at Rosewood.
Oh wow!
In 1973 or 4. And because I had never seen the Monty Python version.
I was saying they were cutting edge. Like that's got to be
that particular thing. It was like, what is this?
Yeah, that's like
that's awesome.
That's cutting edge.
It was great. I'm Here for an Argument. No, second door on the left. I mean, it was.
So to wrap up, because I haven't even touched Steely, and it's been a long interview, and I don't want to. I
have no idea what time it is.
We've been rolling, and it's fine. Yeah, we could talk for hours, and it's not a you thing. I just don't want to. We don't want to go too longer than 2 hours because the public can
too late for that. Sure.
Well,
so the Steely Dan questions is
my question to you is that when did you discover? Like, were you always into Steely from back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, the early albums and stuff. I probably, again, some more than others at the time, more because I owned them.
Right.
Like, I don't say I kind of missed Katie Lied when it was new.
Right.
But I remember when we were cleaning out my grandmother's house in 1978, she had a copy of the record. I don't know why my 78-year-old grandma had a copy of Katie Lied.
That's awesome.
And I remember sitting at her house when we were little, she died and we were getting rid of furniture and doing whatever else. And it was like, and I sat there and listened to it at headphones. And this was already after Royal Scam and Asia had come out. And Royal Scam I played endlessly.
Yes.
And I won't do this. I just want to see, make sure it's not, no, it's as long as it's not my wife. She's the only one.
Right.
She gets a pass.
She deserves it.
She gets a pass for eternity.
Yeah.
We've been together since 1973, so it's been 51
That's
years.
awesome.
Yeah,
Congrats.
That's good
when
stuff.
I was, in 10th grade in high school. But yeah, so some of the albums I say I listen to more than others, but and then when Nightfly came out, was right when my son was born, my oldest, and we would get up in the morning and I would put the needle on the record, and we'd play whatever side was facing up, would play it during breakfast, and then I'd flip it over and play the other side.
That's so awesome.
And I must have done that. And then the next morning, we'd start with the side that was facing up and would flip it over. And I must have done that for 6 months.
Right.
Just played that record to death.
Me too. When I discovered Nightfly, I just got hooked on it.
Well, there'd already been that 3-year gap or whatever from a Steely Dan record.
Right.
I was like,
Well, my thing was, see, this isn't in real time. I'm talking about this is in the late 90s.
Yes,
you know
I'm
what
older
saying?
than you.
I dig that. I got that. But I just want to make sure you know that we're not chewing the same dirt, but it's similar.
Yeah,
right.
But you can't all be born in the same decade.
Correct.
Right.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised at how many kids either know some classic rock or yet have big gaps of things that I thought were either some things more important or whatever. Right. Whereas when we were right now, for example, you can go see how many different Led Zeppelin or Grateful Dead tribute bands, right?
Right.
Say basically 70s music.
Right.
Imagine me in the 70s looking back at the music from the 1920s.
Yeah.
Right.
And going, wait a minute, where's the Louis Armstrong tribute band?
Right.
It would be the weirdest thing for us to be looking 50 years back to go look at stuff.
Sure.
And the same, again, my era, by the time we get to the 70s, we have Sha Na Na, which is a 50s tribute band.
Right.
I mean, basically, right? They're throwback.
And successful.
I watched Sha Na Na religiously.
Successful.
And Happy Days is a big TV show, which is basically, it's the 50s.
Yep.
And I remember telling my friends at the time, I said, and this is, I got to think about the progression here. I said, the 60s, I said, I was like, the 80s will be the rebirth of the 60s, the same way that 70s had been the rebirth of the 50s. Right. I said, or I said something like this, the 60s or the 80s will be the 60s of the 90s or something like that, where I just mixed up. I said, it's just going to happen.
Yeah, right.
And it just does. It's like, but
why
now
bell-bottoms
it's
came
got
back.
even longer in the duration, that the fact that there were 80s tribute bands and 90s, where they weren't specific to a band. And when I was, growing up, there was a Beatles band.
Right.
And there was an Elvis impersonator. And there might have been a Frank Sinatra guy.
Right.
But that was it.
Right.
There wasn't like every band in the world. There's not a Mars Volta tribute band. We were playing, and this is, I was hanging the banner, the big vinyl banner that says Crack the Sky. I was hanging it on stage at the Queen in Wilmington, I think is the place. And this woman comes up to the stage. She's in the building for some reason because we're not open. The doors aren't open. The band ain't even set up yet. And she goes, oh, and I'm not kidding. Was there a Crack the Sky tribute band playing here tonight?
That's
and I
hilarious.
went, no, Crack the Sky is playing here tonight.
That's amazing.
And I thought the fact that somebody thought there would be a Crack the Sky tribute band was hilarious.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
I wonder if there is.
2 or 3 years ago. It was I thought it was hilarious.
That's fucking awesome. Yeah.
There might be.
There's got to be. And I was to say, eventually there is going to be one called, Hot Razors, a tribute to Crack the Sky. It'll be.
Well, it's funny because you have. I mean, even when the concept of tribute band was strange to me. In fact, I remember looking at and no offense to those who like what they like, and again, because we all have different tastes, I can appreciate music that I don't like.
Right.
I try to explain that to people sometimes. There is bad music, but generally, just something. Lots of things that I can appreciate. Say that's really well done. It's really well written. It's well performed. It's the sonically, it's amazing. Whatever it is.
Sure.
But I don't like it, and that's fine. But I was sitting I played a show in Towson, and they were doing in a street thing in the summer on the Friday night streets or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I just literally went over to what's now the Rec Room, to have a hamburger at the end of the show. And they have the little calendar there that shows what's coming up this month. And it was nothing but tribute bands. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, this is just weird. Because previously it had been what I would call legacy bands. it would be Joe Jackson, it would be Little Feat, it would be Crack the Sky, it would be, and like all of a sudden it's these, and I mean, again, there's no disrespect, but 5 AC/DC bands and 12 Grateful Dead tribute bands. It's like, first off, there's no variety, and come on. And, right. And I think a Talking Heads band.
Yep.
And one of the owners walked by, I think Brian Recker. And I said, and I literally like grabbed his shirt sleeve and said, hey, and he'd known me from playing with Crack the Sky for 15 years or so. And I was the one who booked the shows there too, through their agent and through Paul Mann and whatever. So and he was the one who paid me at the end of the night. So we know each other. And I said, if I put together a band that does something hard, because I was basically poo-pooing the thing they had there. Right. It's going to take some practice, Right. I said, that takes all Tower of Power or all Chicago or all Steely Dan. Would you give me a date? And he goes, yeah, I'll give you a date. And I said, I'm not kidding. Like, if you tell me you'll promise me a date, I'm going to put a 10-piece band together, 10, 12-piece band together that's going to do the Steely Dan or do one of these things like that. And he goes, I'll give you a date. And this is literally a 30-second, 2-minute conversation. And he walks away, and I think, who the fuck is going to want to do all that work other than me? Right. And every person I called said yes right off the bat.
That's so awesome.
And so it's just, and we never had a rehearsal. I had the horns over at my house one day. I had the 2 guitar players and the bass player over at my house one day, and we had a couple at Archbishop Curley of all places where we had 6 or 8 people there to try and run songs.
Wait, so Technicolor Motor Home came about because you looked at the upcoming shows at the
and
record?
I thought they were shitty.
That's amazing.
That's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
And I seriously thought, this is for one gig.
Right.
We're going to put this together for one gig. And everybody jumped at it.
Oh,
and at the last
awesome.
minute, one of the guitar player one of them had to bail, and Brian Ewald stepped in with no rehearsal. And we said, well, this song, that song. He said, all the other ones I don't know or whatever. I can't shed between now and then. And we played our first show at the record. And I kind of thought that was it. And then then Baltimore Magazine wrote us up as the best tribute band in Baltimore.
That's so funny.
And then literally the next issue. Yeah. And then the next gig we got was opening for Steely Dan's lead guitarist, John Harrington.
Oh, my God, John Harrington. Oh.
And it was like, I couldn't have bought that gig last year.
This fucking guy.
That's amazing.
John Harrington. Oh,
and it was
my
like,
God.
How does that happen where you throw this together and that's your next gig?
Oh, because you wanted a burger.
Right, because I wanted a burger. And they had the best burgers in town. And I asked them at one point, too. I said, Brian, how come... First, they had that 90-year-old grill, which I've unfortunately just stopped using recently. Right. The one that when you walk up the ramp, it would be on the left, cooking things to death. So, and I'm thinking it's the grill, and he goes, it's fresh meat. That's all it takes.
Right.
but yeah, so that was, and I was the 8x10, and Abigail and was Brian there too, right? Who run the 8x10.
Yeah.
So, but again, that was where that gig was.
And so, but
and we crammed the 10 of us onto that stage.
But these players,
at the 8x10,
you called players you knew liked Steely Dan.
Well, players I like to play with.
Did all of them know the music?
None of us knew. Some of us that had been like the horn guys and I had all been in Carrie's band in Expensive Hobby, and we did maybe 5 Steely Dan songs.
So they knew the
band.
flavor.
And I had written the horn charts at that point for those. Ben Sherman, the guitar player, was with the group Hectic Red. And I had done shows where I'd helped sound with them. And I'd seen the band before. I mean, several times. I know a couple of them before they were in Hectic Red. And they were together for 30 years. But they did 3 or 4 Steely Dan songs. And it's like, I know, well, I got a couple guys who know at least a couple in between us.
Right.
We'll put it together.
We'll put it together, right.
And the drummer, Mark St. Pierre, again, he and I played with.
Oh, my God, that guy.
And Mark and I had played with Naked Blue together and with, and Carrie's band for 6 or 7 years together. And so, like, I knew good people. And and Meg Murray, Brian Ewald, Mark St. Pierre, and Anthony Satola were also a band prior to that called Nonfiction or Majesty 12. So I bet this group of people from one band, and this group of people from another band. I'm just putting them together.
That's brilliant.
And I got to sit in the middle and play the quarter notes while everybody did the hard stuff.
You got a super group. I know, it's brilliant.
Yeah,
you're the Fagin.
Awesome.
I mean,
I play the easy parts.
I have not seen this band.
Dude, where do you see Technicolor Motor Home?
How close to Carroll County are you now?
Well, I grew up here. My family lives in Finksburg.
Yeah.
My parents.
Okay, I'm playing the Carroll County Farm Museum on Sunday at 6:00.
We're going to be at the beach.
Yeah, well, so I'll be at the beach. I'll be at the beach at the Rehoboth Beach.
He said I'll be there.
That's a different day.
No, trust me. I'll
check. Whenever this airs, but this is early in the summer now. We play every year for maybe the past 10 or 12 years. Have played the final season-ending concert at the Lerman Woodland Theater in beautiful Catonsville.
So when would that be?
That would be the last weekend of August.
So this will be out before that. So that's
right. It's like the 25th because the next weekend is the Labor Day is the 1st is a Monday.
Right.
So it won't be that weekend. It'll be the weekend. Well,
that's a good segue. I mean, how can people find that out? What's the website?
TechnicolorMotorHome.com, sonsofpirates.com.
Got it. And I'll post it at the end of the episode also.
Lerman Theater is one of my parks.
I know. We talked about that with Ricky.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's right next to Catonsville High School. It's one of the, and they do an incredible concert series with really some phenomenal bands throughout the summer. Free concerts every Saturday and Sunday for 12 weeks.
And it's gorgeous.
Yeah, you're in this big grassy bowl with huge oak trees on either side, and it sounds, the band's on a concrete slab. Right. Sit at the one end of it, and it sounds wonderful, and the great audience, and it's all
like
done.
Our Red Rocks,
all volunteer,
our natural amphitheater,
a little bit,
all volunteer, and then donations. They pass a bucket at the end of the night because they get occasionally, like somebody like a Bill's Musical sponsor them or a gardening center or somebody will pay major, but they don't pay much. But any band would beg to be in the thing. I mean, seriously,
cool. Yeah,
I'm just lucky that I'm there twice this summer.
Yeah,
with two bands. Most I've ever been in one summer is 3, but.
That's fucking awesome because you can pull right up. You pull up. They got a little ramp.
It sounds great, and the sound company, Mike and Mindy Lang, who do that. Again, I'm mentioning as many names as I can remember, just because we're talking about Baltimore. These are the people that make the Baltimore music scene in the era that I'm in.
Sure,
yeah.
I can't, and I'm always surprised when I find, like we played Robin. You may know her last name with Shake the Room. The female singer with Shake the Room, who's also with Jason Seymour, who does Bad with Names. Like this, first time I ever worked with her was last week, and it was a pickup band with
Shake the Room's. They're great,
and she's the lead singer for that. Was her and Dave DeMarco and me and David Bell, and like we were all
Robin Bingham.
Bingham, thank you. couldn't remember the last name. But again, but I'm so always happy to meet somebody 20 years or 30 years younger than me. It's like good because I'm going to need you when I'm 90.
Right.
Because my other friends are all going to be dead.
Well, and if nothing else, you've shown that being kind and networking and paying attention to the rhythms around you will bear fruit. I mean, you're a fucking.
If you're not in enough places often enough.
Yeah. Right.
No, I mean that's the whole idea of this is just getting local bands in here, just seeing what they do and talking about them and letting people know who they are because Baltimore has massive talent everywhere and not a lot of people know about it.
We have some of the literally finest musicians anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
You can, again, swing a stick. It's hard to swing a stick and not hit a good drummer.
I know, man.
We are so blessed in that regard. And I've played with a bad one once. That was it.
It happens. Right, it does happen. They're out there.
But I mean, it doesn't matter. Guitar players, sax players, singers, bass players, songwriters. I mean, the Howard Markman and Eric Scott and Naked Blue and Patty Reese. And I mean, these just people that just they're songwriters. They write as good a song as
Eric
anybody.
Scott opened up the Woodshed, I think. Ricky mentioned that. Like he was the first.
Oh, right. Yeah. He was the first act or whatever.
I think so.
All right.
I just did a session with him. We're doing a public service announcement for the upcoming America's 250th birthday, which is 2 years away.
Holy shit.
Doing a recording of America the Beautiful with Patty Reese doing a version and Eric Scott doing a version.
Good for you.
Yeah, that is 2 years away, right?
Yeah, it is. They're going to start promoting it heavy next year. So.
I know, because the Poe House, I may be making a bust of David Poe, Edgar Allan Poe's father, and there's no photographs or anything of him because I made Edgar Allan Poe
I went to Franklin Junior High, which of course. The library that used to be was the original high school, and that's where he taught, right up there in beautiful Reisterstown.
Nice.
Mr. Poe.
Yep.
Well, look, this has been a lot of fun, and I could talk to you for 7 hours.
Oh yeah, this has been a blast.
But I would like to ultimately. I mean, maybe we'll get one of your bands in here. We'll have you back here sometime for a jam sesh or something like that. Yeah.
Basically in my backyard. I remember when there was, other than the few, Soldiers Delight was not a park.
Right.
It was a dirt hole, and you came here to do
to
orientation exercises with a Boy Scout troop.
Right.
It was kind of funny to see there's actually an entrance and a welcome center now. It's like, really?
That's so funny.
Well, it's fun. I mean, my family moved from Catonsville to Finksburg in '83, and 795 wasn't there, so these are the roads we had to travel through to get to Westminster.
I can't remember, and I'm going to
140.
May have been Ivy Mill, but somebody
no 140 because there was no 795, so you went to the back roads to Deer Park over Nicodemus.
But I'm saying, in order to get to Baltimore, you had to go 140 Reisterstown Road all the way to Baltimore.
Yeah. Well, and I remember we had a gig. Can I make sure if it was Ivy Mill or something else? Somebody said, we've got a gig at so-and-so's house on Ivy Mill Road. It may not have been Ivy Mill, I can't remember. And when I went, before, and I'm not joking, I'm going, before or after you drive through the stream? Right. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you got to go down through about 8 inches of water where the road literally dead ends at the stream, and you drive across the other side and get on the other side. He goes, oh no, they've paved that now.
There's gravel on there.
And that could be Ivy Mill. Yeah.
And I was thinking, really, you're kidding me? Like that was part of the fun, was you got to drive through the water,
the adventure. Yeah.
But awesome. That was which side of the stream are we playing on?
Yeah. That's right.
So all this stuff back Nicodemus and whatever, it was all back in this area. So
well, look, fun. I appreciate. Do you have anything you want to plug? Like
no, I said the bands. I'm very lucky to be in the bands I'm in, and I have my own website, just if glennworkman.com or freaksound.com, and there's usually links to bands and other stuff there. But Facebook and social media type stuff, but usually the websites for the bands are the best places.
Yep, I'll have links to all that stuff.
And I appreciate you doing this so much. We're going to put your Rolling Stone report too.
I'll give you the link for that. Because I basically have to uncover it on Facebook, or I'll put it up on my site somewhere. So.
And I want you to get me Mark St. Pierre. Well, the drummer.
We'll see. We'll get Mark.
Let's see if we can do it. Because I met him. I've met him one time, and I gave him a very respectful, very nice compliment, and it was genuine. And it was when we played with you. I'm backstage, and me being a Steely head and loving all of that music. He's warming up, and I hear him break into "I Keep Forgetting" by Michael McDonald.
Right. I may have been playing on the piano. He may have jumped in or something.
That groove is one of those grooves that it's hard to get right, and not many drummers can get that groove right. And I'm backstage, and I'm hearing it, and I'm going, "Holy shit!" He's like, he's the sauce. And so I walked right up to him, and I said, "I keep forgetting." He goes. Yeah. You knew what it was. I said, you're playing it perfect. Yeah. And I shook his hand and,
The fun part about the band, other than the great players, and first off, you got ridiculously good music to work with.
Of course.
That's half the battle. But we're not trying to be a look-alike band or a sound-alike band. We want to do the songs well. We want to do the songs justice. Right. That doesn't mean they're going to be note for note like the record, though there are plenty of parts that are.
Mm-hmm.
But that's part of the fun. When you go see Steely Dan live, they don't do it note for note.
They do it.
I like that.
And some of the ones, we do their live versions of it. Like we let the girls sing Dirty Work, and we do the jazz version of Really in the Years. And we do, just because, why not?
Right.
And there's so much, and I've still got, like, we're coming up the show in Ramshead in October at Ramshead Annapolis, where this year we're doing the Royal Scam album in its entirety.
We've done one stage like where you can sit at the tables.
Yeah, the tables. So that'll be the because we've done the Asia there before, and I thought we were only 2 songs we weren't doing off of. At some point or another, we haven't done off of Royal Scam. I said, let's pick up those 2 songs and let's do that record.
We may have to go to that. Right. We can get a table where there's a 4-top table.
I would love to go to that.
I'll work that out.
Tickets on sale now.
They're on sale right now.
They're already on sale.
I will talk you through the Royal Scam because he's a huge music lover, but he hasn't gone deep dive Steely. But he
I'm a Steely Dan fan. My wife isn't.
Well, no, listen,
but she could be.
She will be if she just gives it time.
Right.
Let it percolate.
It's funny how some of it has become yacht rock.
Yeah,
where it's not.
I know
it's on the fringe of things. Well, but it's like, okay, at least you're listening to good music,
right?
So
my thing is yacht rock. I mean, I love yacht rock. Like, I don't know why it's
Beagles.
become...
I mentioned the Regal Beagles, right? That's a yacht. That was the Tom Moon's yacht rock band before yacht rock was a thing.
Yeah, dude.
He literally led the vanguard of that, and then stopped.
All that music, Boz Scaggs, Steely,
Hall & Oates,
Michael
McDonald, Pablo Cruz, just
I love it all.
It's like if you're in a band and you're a player, they're all serious players.
Yeah.
Like you know, these
some
are
of the
not,
stuff that even I just thought was radio ear candy at the time. Having to learn it, you went, I can't believe how incredibly well recorded some of this stuff is.
Right.
I mean, at least the stuff that was chosen for that band. And the vocal arrangements, the musical arrangements, the song writing, you go, these are really, really well-written songs.
Absolutely.
Even if they were one-hit wonders.
Right.
Like, somebody knew how to put this together and make it do that.
Yeah, it's a whole other genre of music that's underappreciated. Well, it's weird. It's appreciated, but it's kind of
party
like
music or
it's kind of like shit on, but I don't know. It shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's poo-pooed a little bit,
Yeah.
but people don't have any trouble, dancing to it.
Right, but they'll rock the night away to it. So. All right. Well, look, this has been a great time.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Wonderful
you.
Great seeing you again. Yeah. Wonderful meeting you.
And please tell people that, tell people about the show and that
certainly.
we're doing good things over here.
They're having fun. You've got a 3-hour drive to Ocean City. Is a perfect thing to put on your car.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Yep.
All right. Stay sane,
well,
Baltimore.
thank you all.
Yep.
You have a good evening.
Thanks for listening, Baltimore. You can find us at www.sanitylounge.com or on Instagram at sanity.lounge.
Keep listening and subscribe.
Stay sane, Baltimore.